Hi, welcome back guys. This is your sensei, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Naruto Became Ice God's Host? Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Naruto turned to his companion and asked Yuki about what would happen when she froze the era to let a new one begin. Yuki did not even glance at him, busy sharpening her nails, and replied that she would not kill him because she would need a compatible host in the future. She said that whether the people below would survive 1,000 years or so was up to them, and that many had already lost their lives either by her actions or by the war beneath them. Naruto noted that she seemed unmoved, and Yuki told him that being the goddess of ice, space, and time made her duty cold. Naruto asked if he would be able to see the people again, and Yuki answered that it depended, since she held his life and he would not die. Naruto stood silently, took a deep breath, and sighed helplessly. Yuki then said they had work to do, and Naruto obeyed. Later, in a quieter time, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze sat on a wooden swing and made himself comfortable, leaning back on the net behind him and shifting a pillow for convenience. The circular glass window in front of him gave him a perfect view of the village of Kanahigakure. Its glittering streetlights nearly danced with the stars above and the bright full moon. The entire village felt celebratory for the day the fourth Hokage defeated the nine-tailed fox, the Kyuubi festival. Naruto could hear his father, Minato Namikaze, the fourth Hokage and the yellow flash of the leaf, calling for his elder sister Narumi to finish dressing. Kushina Uzumaki told Menma, the second-born, to get Naruto downstairs so the family could leave. Naruto smiled inwardly at his elder brother's complaints and walked up the stairs when Menma opened his door without knocking. Naruto had anticipated Menma's teasing and even mimicked the line under his breath. He heard the door slam and then Kushina scolding Menma for rudeness, which made Naruto think of his parents as hypocritical. The family shuffled downstairs and Minato used a teleportation technique to appear elsewhere just as the first red firework burst into the sky, exploding into fleeting sparks that resembled a flower. More fireworks followed. This routine had repeated for the past 2 years. When Naruto was 6, he noticed his parents paying more attention to his siblings. At first he thought they were cautious because his siblings were Jinchuriki, but as time passed he lost hope and became a shadow in his own family. Naruto rose from the swing and looked at himself. His hair was pale blonde, not as bright as Menma's nor as dark as Minato's, and it fell between spiky, straight, and soft curls like his sister Narumi's. His blue eyes, inherited from his father, had dimmed from the weight he carried. He did not have the pronounced whisker marks some children showed from the Kyuubi's chakra, and his pale skin made him look fragile, which kept many clan heirs from letting him join them for fear of causing him harm. Despite his delicate appearance, he was popular with the girls and had earned the nickname Prince Charming. A simple glance and an unsteady smile sent them swooning. He was also the smartest student in the academy after Itachi and his father, and Uchiha Sasuke had been placed in the new role of the knight, much to Sasuke's dismay and the amusement of Naruto's brother and cousin. Naruto wore white pajamas under a blue silk robe and fluffy bunny slippers. He did not lack material things. His attic room had been given to him when he was 7 and was large, clean, and well decorated. For huge windows and 2 medium circular ones offered clear views of the front and backyards. A large bed, shelves of books and scrolls, a closet full of clothes, a separate closet for training clothes, a study table with a lamp, curtains on the windows, neatly arranged weapons, a couch, a recliner, and framed awards from the academy lined the walls. Most of the awards were certificates that Naruto hung to provoke reactions from his older siblings, to show that he did not need Minato or Kushina to succeed. He wanted proof that he could stand on his own. An outsider entering the room would see the residence of a talented, privileged young master, but for Naruto it was the room of a child who could be given everything except warmth, love, and care from his family. He thought of himself as an outsider. He flipped the family picture face down and left the room to make himself some dinner. Naruto spared his ears from the training in the backyard, where Kushina and Minato were teaching Menma and Naruto how to climb a tree using chakra. Of course, being Uzumaki and Jinchuriki, their chakra control was restrained. It was normal for them to have terrible chakra control. They rocketed off the tree on their first step. The pair got up and tried again and again with the same result, and Kushina and Minato could only sigh from the side. Naruto announced that he was leaving as he stepped into the backyard, still polite because he lived under Minato and Kushina's roof and was still a child. Kushina and Minato glanced at the youngest. He was quiet, well-behaved, and surprisingly patient compared with Menma and Narumi. Kushina sighed and waved him away. Narumi complained loudly that it was unfair and asked why Naruto did not have to suffer with them. Naruto kept a half-hearted smile, his expression edged with amusement and quiet mockery. Naruto declined the idea of special training, smiling that he did not need it. Minato sighed and suggested that Naruto try the exercise before the twins made a scene. Naruto asked what he would get in return, already guessing Minato would offer a reward. Minato said he would teach the next level of chakra control and placed another blue flag above a tree for Naruto. Naruto accepted with a polite nod while sneering inwardly. He walked toward the tree as if it were just another part of the garden, ignoring Kushina's instruction and taking his steps casually. He planted his feet on the bark and continued walking as if the tree were not there, his pace unchanged. He reached the top, plucked the flag, and walked back down to hand it to Minato. The four were surprised at his performance. Naruto asked if he could go now, sounding impatient. The twins erupted, insisting it was not fair and demanding to know how he had learned it before them. Naruto scoffed and walked back inside, leaving the noisy house. He wandered leisurely through the forest, following the river, until he came to an odd cave. His senses urged him to stay away, but his legs moved of their own accord. As he approached, the air grew colder, snow and ice piled. At the entrance, icicles hung from the ceiling. He went deeper until he reached a dead end where the ice itself seemed to glow. A huge block of ice stood within arm's reach, something trapped inside. When he extended a hand to clear the frost, the spot where his fingers would touch melted on its own. He paused, then tried the same thing with his other hand and saw the same result. Intrigued, he focused on the area around the object until the ice melted and the item fell to the ground. He knelt and examined a whip that could easily be mistaken for a decorative sash. White and blue strands coiled together along its length, and the handle was gold with a small white diamond at its butt. There were strange carvings on the handle. When he picked it up, he nicked his thumb and noticed a drop of blood on the metal. Immediately his body went rigid. Cracks opened beneath him and he plunged into darkness. He hit icy water below and his consciousness began to slip. A woman's voice thanked him for freeing her and promised a reward. That was the last coherent thing he registered before everything closed in. The handle would not leave his hand, and a sharp, overwhelming ache assaulted his mind. Naruto woke to a field of white. It was less a ceiling than a white sky. Everything around him was pale and indistinct. He sat up, rubbed his head, and wondered if he was dead. He lay back down and closed his eyes, the brightness pressing at him. Footsteps sounded, heels tapping closer and closer, yet there was no visible source. The footsteps seemed to come from all directions until a child's voice addressed him. He turned and saw a girl. She wore a white dress trimmed with fur, small blue gems at her hips, white knee socks, and navy-heeled shoes. White gloves with ribbons covered her hands, and a red apple rested in one of them. A white choker with a sapphire pendant sat at her throat, a blue flower adorned her chest, and a small blue crown topped hair as white as fresh snow. Sapphire earrings framed her face and icy blue eyes fixed on him with an unnerving intensity. She sat on a blue, checkered throne-like chair surrounded by glowing snowflakes, a picture of a fairy tale queen. Naruto felt warning bells ring in his head. Although the girl looked fragile enough that a gust of wind might topple her, the dangerous glint in her eyes contradicted her appearance. Naruto asked cautiously who she was. Yuki smiled and told him he seemed very interesting, ignoring his question. She observed that he had been neglected by his family and said it was a pity, then added that he would not be needing them anymore as she stepped closer. Yuki introduced herself as the goddess of space, time, and ice, the spirit that had been sealed in the whip he now held. She explained that, having been freed, she and Naruto were bonded. She needed a host to leave her prison, and he needed power. As she spoke, Naruto's inner mindscape shifted and cracked, revealing a snowy mountain range. Yuki informed him that the contract had already been made. She would act as his tenant and he would be her host. She promised to assist him to the best of her ability, and in return he would be required to assist her when she asked. She added that it was too late to refuse, then chuckled and gave him no time to react. Naruto raised his hands to protest, but Yuki ignored him. Yuki warned through their mental link that he had 3 hours to go home, pack, and leave, because staying would draw attention. She said she would train him and that she could not tolerate a weak host, then pushed him out of the mindscape. The transition left him disoriented. Yuki urged him mentally that time was ticking. Naruto surfaced into ice-cold water that would have made most people shiver, but the cold felt strangely comfortable, the result of Yuki's influence. He looked at the whip in his hand and snapped it toward the ceiling. When the whip struck, a section of the roof collapsed. Naruto marveled at how natural the weapon felt in his grip, as if he had used it for years. Yuki explained that she had placed automatic functions in the weapon but warned that they would not last long. A day should be enough to shake off any pursuers. Naruto muttered to himself, wondering which deity he had offended and promising he would not slap them. Normally mild-tempered, he found his hidden frustrations rising and felt strangely agitated. He hurried home using the tree-climbing technique to reach the attic window. Inside, he packed clothes, weapons, books, scrolls, and essentials into a summoning scroll Yuki had provided. His family had gone out to eat, so he took food without leaving a trace and slipped out through the kitchen window. He dashed into the forest and headed for the nearest fence of Kanahagakure, avoiding patrols with Yuki guiding him like a GPS. The whip, tied around his waist like a belt, extended at his command when he channeled chakra into it and embedded itself in the wall. Using the whip to pull himself up, Naruto flipped over the wall, grasped the top, carefully scanned the area, and began to descend. The whip retracted on its own when he flicked it. Yuki urged him to go northwest, and Naruto obeyed, running through a moonless, cloudy night guided entirely by her warnings so he would not stumble over roots, branches, or rocks. She alerted him that 4 small pursuers were tracking him and told him there was a river ahead whose current could carry him faster. Grateful inwardly for her guidance, Naruto relied on his Uzumaki stamina and chakra reserves and kept moving, knowing that stopping would mean capture. Before he could reach the river, a kunai struck his back. Startled, he tumbled and fell into the water. Masked Anbu leaped into action. One with a panther mask asked who the infiltrator was, and another with a rat mask ordered them to capture the intruder as they moved toward the river. The chase intensified. Naruto's consciousness briefly faltered when Yuki pushed into his body to evade the attackers. Under her control, he moved with swift, evasive precision and launched countermeasures that kept the pursuers off balance. While Yuki maintained control, she used Naruto's body to slip through the scene and suppress their presence until it was safe to withdraw. When Naruto finally recovered control, he found himself in a sparsely furnished room containing only a bed, a closet, a table, and a chair. He rubbed his head as he sat up and asked where Yuki had taken them. Yuki explained that they were in Orochimaru's abandoned lab, which, despite its history, offered a suitable hideaway for now. She noted that a nearby town would make resupplying convenient. Naruto rose unsteadily and explored the lab. With Yuki's navigation, he reached a larger room filled with dusty medical equipment, apparatuses, and jars of strange-colored liquids. He wondered how he would buy supplies without money. Yuki scolded him to use his brain and reminded him that this was Orochimaru's lab, implying that it contained resources and risks he should consider carefully. Yuki told Naruto to use it to his advantage, her tone sharp with annoyance. Naruto asked incredulously if she meant he was to experiment on people and ally with snakes, and Yuki reacted with an exasperated gesture. Yuki explained that the man in question was notorious for experimenting on people, a mad scientist whose medical knowledge rivaled even Senju Tsunade. She pointed out that his understanding of seals had baffled Naruto's parents, and that no one should assume he was simple. Hearing this, Naruto's view of the world widened. Yuki added that she would have taken that man as a patron rather than rely on a lecherous man who had shown little care for Naruto. Naruto sighed and paced the room. Yuki made it clear that Naruto should get to work, and then abruptly pushed him out of her mindscape. 5 years passed. Naruto relied heavily on shadow clones, sending them to study medicine, poisons, weaponry, and sealing techniques, while the original focused on taijutsu as Yuki insisted. Yuki also had him study botany so he could harvest and refine herbs into affordable remedies for those who could not pay for chakra healing. A half-mile radius of carefully tended plants surrounded his home, with medicinal herbs to the east and poisonous plants to the west. A large wooden fence enclosed the area, and Naruto's two-story house sat in the center. The clinic occupied the first floor and the second floor was his living space. Naruto lived at a distance from the nearby settlement called Leisure Village, a place whose name reflected its reputation, an entertainment district with gambling halls, nightclubs, and adult venues. Although the businesses operated in the shadows, none of the hidden villages dared to shut the district down. Beneath the village, the black market moved in secret. The streets were dim and often dangerous. Because Naruto was the only doctor in the area, he earned a reputation and respect. People avoided causing trouble in his territory, or they paid a steep price. Naruto had been reprimanded once for appearing so young while working near such a place. Few expected someone so small and slight to hold the knowledge and skills he possessed. To avoid recognition, Yuki had altered his appearance. His former blonde hair had turned snowy white, his blue eyes took on a deeper, gem-like quality, and his skin remained pale and fragile-looking no matter how hard he trained or ate. These features led most to underestimate him at first, but those who challenged the only doctor in the vicinity soon learned the cost of such a mistake. Fools who crossed him were swiftly taught a harsh lesson in a way that left no doubt about the consequences. The village was open to many kinds of people. Ninjas, missing nin, and criminals frequented its streets. A strict rule protected patrons inside the village walls. No bloodshed was permitted within, and everyone honored that rule. The village lord, whose identity remained a mystery, used the village's wealth to influence the hidden villages and ensure order, so the bottom line was rarely crossed. The background was complicated and dangerous. A knock at the clinic door interrupted Naruto's work. He opened it and faced an older man who hesitated before identifying himself. The man was Hatake Kakashi, and he explained that he had brought his team and a client because his genin had been poisoned. Naruto studied the group behind Kakashi and felt a familiar, bitter thought that fate seemed to be mocking him as he recognized faces he connected to his past. He surveyed them with a trace of ridicule at their injured state but kept his expression controlled. Naruto invited them inside and led them to chairs before retrieving a lab gown from the closet and putting it on. He chose a pair of blue-rimmed reading glasses for appearance and placed a stethoscope around his neck. He then took a clipboard and asked Menma to sit on the bed. Kakashi muttered that he did not fully trust the doctor, and Menma stayed tense, but Naruto pretended not to notice their private doubts. Naruto gently took Menma's hand to examine the wound, and his expression changed as he assessed the situation, the seriousness of the poisoning reflecting in his features. Naruto asked whether their opponent involved the demon brothers as he walked to the cabinet, took out a bottle of pills, placed some in a small saucer, and poured water into a glass. Narumi frowned and asked how he knew. Naruto snorted and handed the pills to Menma, explaining that the medication would flush the poison from his body. He added that he was familiar with the poison he made it and knew his customers and that, fortunately, it was a slow-acting variety. He readied the acupuncture needles. Sakura reacted angrily at the revelation that Naruto had manufactured the poison. Naruto told her to keep her voice down and explained that he made poisons and antidotes for money. Customers were free to use his products as they wished as long as they paid. He pushed up his glasses. Narumi gritted her teeth but was held back by Kakashi while Naruto put on surgical gloves and prepared to treat Menma. He made a small, precise incision to allow drainage, then used acupuncture needles around the wound. A dark, viscous fluid seeped into the towel beneath Menma's arm. Naruto remained calm and focused. When the flow changed, he removed the needles and placed them in the basin, then carefully cleaned the area to prevent infection and began stitching the wound. Naruto asked whether they wanted the wound to leave a scar. Menma was about to say it would heal, but Kakashi gave a warning look. Narumi requested that no scar be left. Naruto pretended not to notice and hovered his hand over the wound. A soft green light passed from his palm and the wound closed rapidly. After a few minutes he withdrew his hand and no scar remained. Kakashi praised Dr. Sotaru's medical skill, and Naruto nodded. He prepared a few pills in small glass bottles and explained that taking them for a day would help the remaining poison exit the body through sweat. He filled out a clipboard and placed a slip of paper with the bill on the table. Before Sakura could protest the cost, a knock sounded at the door. Naruto opened it to find the demon brothers standing there. He told them to come inside and they limped in, pausing at the sight of Team Kakashi already inside and taking defensive stances to protect Tazuna. Naruto reminded everyone that his territory had a strict rule: no violence within his clinic. He stated that he did not care about anyone's affiliations, legal ninja or missing nin, because they were his patients while on his premises, and he would not tolerate his rules being broken. He warned that anyone who insisted on fighting would be blacklisted and denied future treatment. Sakura protested that the demon brothers were enemies, but Naruto reiterated that they were his customers here and must comply. He motioned the two men to the bed, closed the white curtains, created shadow clones to assist, and began treating them. Sakura muttered that he was arrogant as Team Kakashi prepared to leave for the land of waves. Tazuna commented calmly that that was Dr. Sotaru for them. Menma recognized the name and asked whether Dr. Sotaru was the respected doctor of the Pleasure Village. Sasuke observed that the doctor did not look like much at first glance. Kakashi noted that, despite his youth, the doctor was knowledgeable and very skilled. Narumi wondered aloud whether Orochimaru's hideout might be nearby. Kakashi reflected that Orochimaru tended to gather talented people, and that a child with formidable medical skill would normally have attracted Orochimaru's attention, but it seemed the risk hadn't been worth it. He described the Pleasure Village as a chaotic place full of missing nin and petty crime, where many orphans might already have been taken in for experiments. Narumi admitted she felt uneasy because the doctor seemed familiar. Sasuke teased that it was probably the hair color and personality. Kakashi defended himself with a dry remark. Kakashi privately noted that the doctor's chakra signature resembled Naruto's but was calmer and oddly cold, with a faint scent of herbs and mint layered over it. He wondered who the doctor truly was as he glanced toward the distant gate. Naruto adjusted his lab gown and headed into town to buy food. Supplies at the clinic had run out. He walked down the road with the easy confidence that came from living in the Pleasure Village, where people made way for him as if parting for a boulder. He bought what he needed, paid, sealed the items on scrolls, and began to return. On the way he dodged a scuffle where someone was thrown into the adjacent storefront. Continuing along the path to his clinic through the woods, Naruto came upon two female genin and their unconscious sensei. The jonin lay out cold with many injuries, and the genin looked exhausted and hurt. Normally he would have passed by without getting involved, but he recognized the unconscious woman: reddish-brown hair, pale skin, a navy blue kimono patterned with green leaves and flowers, and blue eyes. From her outfit, Naruto might have assumed she was an ordinary civilian, but the Leaf Village forehead protector made it clear she was not. This woman was Higurashi Kimiko. Years earlier, during his academy days when everyone fussed over his siblings, an elite ninja passing the training ground had noticed him. Kimiko had jumped down from a tree branch and pointed out that he was the child of the fourth village leader. Naruto had given a curt nod and introduced himself. Kimiko evaluated his potential and remarked that he had more promise than the two spoiled siblings everyone idolized, warning that those siblings might grow up ruined by constant pampering. Naruto had been surprised. He had never heard anyone speak ill of the village heroes. He had asked Kimiko for pointers, gesturing toward the scattered kunai, and she had agreed with a grin. Naruto had felt a foreboding tingle but returned her smile. From that day forward, with Kimiko's guidance, Naruto rose to the top of the academy. He was proud and happy, and when he showed her his test score she laughed and dragged him to a nearby sushi restaurant to celebrate. Naruto discovered Kimiko was older than she appeared, old enough to be his mother, and that she was fond of children because she could not have any of her own. Kimiko had once told him that since Kushina and Minato disliked him, she was taking him in, as if he were a stray cat without a choice. Naruto, touched and determined not to let his surrogate sister down, worked harder than ever. He was reluctant to leave the village knowing it would sadden Kimiko, but duty eventually called him away. Now, in the present, Naruto commanded 2 men to help carry Kimiko to the car. He revealed a white sedan from a summoning scroll and insisted he was a doctor who could treat her. The men hesitated, suspicious, but after Naruto explained he knew their former teacher and only wanted to repay a favor, they agreed and struggled to lift Kimiko inside. Naruto created 4 shadow duplicates to support the sedan, and they moved through the forest with light, careful steps so the vehicle would not be jostled. Inside his clinic, Naruto's clones prepared materials while he readied himself. He had performed difficult procedures before, but he still felt nervous. He steadied himself in the mirror, breath deep and steady, and fitted a mask and elastic gloves. When the curtain was drawn and the lights turned on, his duplicates stood ready to hand him instruments. Naruto told himself to begin, and set to work with focused hands and a physician's calm. The operation that followed was handled meticulously and professionally, the room a flurry of practiced, efficient motion rather than panic. When the procedure concluded, the staff moved Kimiko carefully and quietly. A short neutral bridge sentence described the next steps as the team tended to her recovery. Later, Naruto closed his eyes and exhaled heavily as he leaned back in his leather chair. He muttered that helping Leaf Village ninjas always seemed to bring trouble. Yuki snorted and reminded him that even if he tried to be distant, he was human and capable of compassion. Naruto then turned to a letter on his desk. The message began with a formal thanks from the feudal lord of the Land of Fire, who acknowledged Naruto's assistance to their ninja and invited him to enter the mid-level ninja promotion exams in the Leaf Village in 2 weeks. The letter noted that the feudal lord had already informed Naruto's village leader, and that an escort would bring him to the Leaf Village. Naruto picked up another crude, practical note that outlined payment terms for the job. The sender proposed splitting the pay, with the writer taking the larger share, and mentioned a reward if Naruto succeeded in the exams. Naruto rolled his eyes and chuckled at the bluntness, then accepted that he would have to go to the Leaf Village after all. He allowed himself a faint joke about adopting the family catchphrase and rose to pack supplies and medical equipment he would need. The Leaf Village escorts would arrive in 3 days. With it being a 5-day walk from his location, Naruto decided to meet them halfway rather than wait. He left dozens of shadow duplicates behind to guard his clinic and territory, hoping they would keep things orderly while he was gone. On the journey, Naruto set out with steady determination. In the Leaf Village, Team Kurenai felt uncertain about their assignment. Their leader, Kurenai, was uneasy at having to escort someone from the infamous Pleasure Village. She had heard unsettling stories about that place. Enko had laughed when she learned the visitor was a child no older than the team's junior ninja who was a skilled doctor knowledgeable about poisons, only to deflate when Kakashi revealed the child was in fact a boy with a gentle, feminine appearance. The 3 juniors on the team Shino, Kiba, and Hinata were less bothered. They had not encountered people from the Pleasure Village before, they had heard many rumors, but as ninjas, they believed in seeing for themselves. The escorts prepared for the meeting, unsure what to expect but ready to fulfill their duty. Seeing is believing after all. Before they could even exit the border of Hai no Kuni, someone approached on horseback from the distance. He looked out of place. He wore a white yukata with navy blue undergarments and light blue hakama pants. His hair was silver with a hint of blue, and his eyes were ice blue, giving a chill that made people feel small even under a scorching sun. He rode a white horse with blue reins. Shino observed that the man's aura was not simple, it was strong, cold, and elegant, yet edged with sharp alertness. Shino's insect companion seemed restless and shivered as if from cold. Naruto himself was giving off a faint mist. Kiba frowned and said he could not smell the man's scent, as if something cold was blocking his nose. If they did not know better, they might think the man had stepped out of a fairy tale painting. Kurenai noted the medical kit strapped to the saddle and thought it kept the stranger from appearing entirely like nobility. Hinata stuttered, asking who he was, her cheeks flushed. Kurenai felt pity for Hinata and admired her restraint, thinking that Hinata's infatuation with the 4th son was still strong. Kiba pointed at Naruto and accused him of having the arrogance of a prince for acting willfully without guards. Naruto retorted coldly, questioning whether this was how Konoha treated visitors and mocking Kiba's clan symbol and smell. Kiba ground his teeth. Kurenai stepped between them and said firmly that the visitor was their client, Dr. Soto. Kiba protested at the idea that this man could be their client, calling him weak. Naruto mocked Kiba's habit of pointing, reminding him that when one pointed a finger at someone else, 4 fingers pointed back at oneself. Kiba looked ready to attack, but Naruto rolled his eyes, amused. Naruto admitted inwardly that he enjoyed the verbal sparring. He had learned in the pleasure village that gaining respect often required clashing with others emotionally and verbally, and that if an opponent remained undisturbed, their words had failed to wound. Naruto urged his horse forward and Kurenai led the way, with the Konoha shinobi following from the trees. Kiba grumbled that Naruto's attitude reminded him of an Uchiha with a Nara mind, and the others agreed. Naruto chuckled inwardly and Yuki hummed that he seemed to be having fun. Naruto responded with a sassy tone that made Yuki laugh. Naruto felt he stood out too much but was too lazy to walk, so he endured bewildered stares and excited squeals from the girls as Team Kurenai led him to the stable. Soter handed the horse to a groom, paid, and petted its snout. Naruto spoke softly to his horse, Nana, and gave it an apple from his satchel before leaving the stable to join Team Kurenai. Naruto asked the shinobi to lead the way politely, and Kurenai began guiding him. Naruto kept pace, aware of unfamiliar eyes on him, likely Anbu and curious shinobi. Team Kurenai escorted him to the Hokage's office, where many were surprised to see him already back after 2 days. Kurenai knocked, and Minato gave permission for them to enter. Naruto took a deep breath, thinking that behind those doors his family waited people who would find him familiar but might not recognize him as the neglected member they once knew. He steadied himself before entering. Inside the room, Naruto saw his mother and siblings on the sofa, with the 3rd Hokage and Jiraiya standing behind Minato. Team Kurenai paid their respects and reported. Jiraiya remarked that they moved fast, and Naruto corrected him, saying he had met them halfway through the journey. Naruto introduced himself as Soto, the representative of the Pleasure Village who intended to compete in the Chunin selection exams under that banner, and offered formal greetings to the 4th Hokage, the 3rd Hokage, and Jiraiya. Jiraiya bristled at the nickname he had been given and protested loudly. Naruto raised an eyebrow and questioned why Jiraiya was so offended when he had a reputation for inappropriate behavior. Jiraiya reacted angrily and pointed at Naruto. Naruto replied that Jiraiya would have been in serious trouble had he not been helped earlier, and suggested vaguely that the source of the trouble had been a questionable place, the exact origin of which he did not know. Naruto added that such problems could have been avoided if Jiraiya had restrained his habits and not lingered in the village. Jiraiya tightened his eyelids, took a few deep breaths to control his temper, and Kushina laughed, saying it served him right. Hiruzen chuckled that he had heard of Naruto from shinobi gossip. Naruto deflected the praise modestly. Minato watched Naruto closely, suspicion and recognition flickering in his eyes. Naruto frowned inwardly, noting that Minato's responses and the way he had given Jiraiya a nickname reminded him of himself. Kurenai and the team continued their report while the room settled into a mix of amusement and serious attention. A short, neutral pause followed as everyone adjusted to the unexpected reunion. Normally he would not let anyone call him by such a familiar name except his own children, so Minato was displeased that this stranger addressed him like that. He wondered if it could be Naruto. His eyes flashed and his senses flared. Naruto felt alarm as Minato released chakra to probe him. Minato's blue chakra flowed, his blonde hair lifting, and his eyes showed equal parts hope and anxiety. Kushina also reacted, releasing chakra. Because she was a host of the 9 tails, some of its chakra mixed with hers, giving her chakra a purple hue. Menma, Narumi, and Team Kurenai were confused by the sudden chakra spike. Jiraiya followed and sent out his own chakra. Naruto called in panic for Yuki. His chakra had changed but was still developing. Alone he might have resisted, but with Minato, Kushina, and Jiraiya probing him he would be discovered, so he needed Yuki's help. Yuki told Naruto to relax and control his expression. A familiar cold sensation rushed into Naruto's chakra pathway, chilling him like a plunge into icy water. He released navy blue chakra to fake resistance to the veteran shinobi's probing. A gap opened and Kushina slipped in, Minato and Jiraiya joined the inspection, only to discover he was not who they were looking for. Annoyed by the foreign chakra in his system, Naruto forcefully expelled it. His chakra flared, ice spreading beneath his feet and frost filling the room. Snow seemed to fall from his form. The others were surprised and recognized an ice-type ability, perhaps a bloodline limit, leaving the probing trio disappointed. Relief washed over Naruto and then fury rose. He sneered that it was rude to be forced into the exams without consent, given a poor welcome, and have his privacy invaded, and he challenged them by asking who the real intruder was, his village or theirs. He sighed as he finally reached the apartment reserved for him, which was near the hospital by his request. Earlier had not been a pleasant experience. Despite the sincere apologies from the third Hokage, Naruto remained displeased. Flashback. Menma jumped to his feet and angrily accused Naruto of comparing their uncivilized village to his. Naruto sneered that forcefully injecting chakra into someone without consent was like harassment and that he could speak his mind. At least his people still had some decency. Narumi shouted that he was lying. Normally they would not lose control, but the Nine-Tails chakra had bled into the situation. Kurama had awakened since the fight in the Land of Waves. Sensing Yuki's flaring chakra displeased him. Though Naruto might deny it, he recognized chakra signatures of his siblings. Feeling the ice chakra, Kurama's burning energy reached out to match it, and Yuki met that challenge with equal force. The siblings' red chakra flared and clashed with Naruto's. Naruto scowled that he had no time for nonsense and demanded to know who they thought they were. Menma accused him of acting entitled, while Naruto reminded them that their village had sought help from his lord and that he had been convinced by his own leader to come. He dismissed them as unimportant. Narumi lashed out, indignant at being talked down to by someone so much younger. Menma accused Naruto of expecting reverence and of showing no respect or etiquette. The two siblings' veins pulsed on their foreheads, their eyes glowed red and fangs appeared as they growled. Naruto sneered that losing control so easily was pathetic and that he considered himself fortunate to witness the scene. Yuki taunted through the mental link, mocking the Nine-Tails hosts as rabid animals. Kurama roared in fury and threatened retribution. Naruto remained calm, hiding his disdain. Kushina wrapped her chakra chains around her children and snapped them out of their stupor. The room returned to normal temperature. Naruto's smile fell. His ridiculing, knowing expression made the others uncomfortable. He was young, but his tongue was sharper than any blade. End flashback. Naruto felt satisfaction at having vented his frustration. Seeing his siblings lose their composure with words felt like a small victory. He did not need Yuki to tell him NBU were watching. He was aware of their surveillance but not overly concerned. He took a shower and prepared for bed, planning to spend the morning at the hospital to pass the time. The next morning, after showering, exercising, and eating breakfast, Naruto dressed in a blue long-sleeve shirt with white stripes, a black tie, black dress pants, and his white lab coat embroidered with his name on the right chest. He put on his glasses and headed to the hospital. He winced inwardly at the squeals of the girls. Everyone stopped and stared. Naruto scoffed at how people judged by appearances, and Yuki mentally laughed that humans were experts at that. He preferred to speak with the male nurses to avoid the blushing attention from the female staff. Annoying. A few days later, Naruto found himself inwardly raging at the people who treated him like a novelty. Many of the younger girls, fangirls bold enough to invent ailments just so he would tend to them, irritated him to no end. He told them he was only there to observe. Even as a doctor, he said, many healers in Konoha had too much free time. Naruto never liked walking alone without an adult male companion nearby to share responsibility. He had befriended Hyuga Kaze, a doctor specialized in poisons, and Uchiha Hajime, a skilled surgeon. Both were 19, quiet, and they and Naruto had formed a shorthand where they could communicate without speaking. Many assumed they were lifelong friends. Naruto did not mind that the two were in a relationship and somewhat outcast in their clans. He accepted them without judgment. Pleasure Village was an open-minded place that welcomed a variety of people and lifestyles. Naruto remained indifferent to its reputation. He focused on his duties. Yuki, who claimed to be a lesbian, later clarified that she was attracted to both men and women. Naruto acknowledged this without fuss. Yuki teased him playfully and treated him as a younger sibling, promising to look out for him until someone else took over that role. Naruto woke up with a throbbing head. He had argued with Yuki the night before. She had been ranting about the flaws of humans, and he had gone to bed more frustrated than soothed. In the bathroom, he stared at his reflection and suddenly slammed the door when something felt off. He repeated the motion, convinced the mirror was wrong, and then shouted in aggravation. The shout echoed through the neighborhood and startled nearby residents and birds. Yuki let her presence be felt in his thoughts, taunting him about the barrier he had placed and her chance for revenge. Naruto pulled at the shoulder-length hair that had grown overnight and cursed under his breath. Yuki found the situation hilarious and used a thread of chakra to grow his hair longer and longer in return, as if daring him to win. Naruto grabbed scissors from behind the mirror and cut handfuls away. Yuki simply regrew the hair, turning their exchange into a ridiculous back and forth until the hair reached his thighs. Yuki declared casually that she could do it all day, each time making his hair longer, and treated his annoyance like a sport. Naruto groaned and tried to calm himself. He had no time for a battle of vanity. He took a long shower, untangled knots, and used a shadow clone to help trim his hair to a manageable length. When he left the bathroom, he found Yuki sitting at the table eating the breakfast he had expected. Yuki explained that the clothes she had left for him were woven from her chakra threads and would act like armor. She told him how, by coating the fabric with his chakra, the defensive weave would activate a barrier against swords. Naruto ran his hand over the cool, smooth fabric and accepted the outfit. Yuki approached and squeezed his cheeks playfully, wishing him a happy birthday in her teasing way. Naruto blushed at the attention. She explained that she had grown his hair so it would match the new clothing and to prevent him from returning to his doctor duties too soon. She claimed the outfit would make him look impressive and draw admiration from others. She also admitted she liked the idea of being able to parade around as his older twin sister. Naruto rolled his eyes at the boast. Yuki tied his silver hair into a high ponytail with a ribbon while continuing to chatter about appearances. She changed her own attire to match his, keeping a playful tone. Both were armed, the dragon whip and the dragon fan at Yuki's waist, and Naruto chose to strap the dragon fang sword to his side. Yuki preened in front of the mirror. Naruto ate his breakfast and shook his head at her theatrics. Despite her arrogance, he knew she had the skill to back it up and could be surprisingly childish at times. Later, Naruto and Yuki went to the Hokage Tower to inform Minato that they would be going on a mission together as a team, a last-minute decision. Minato looked surprised, and whatever suspicions he had previously harbored about Naruto being his long-lost son eased. Yuki boasted that the plan had been hers all along and that, if not for her, the truth would have come out sooner. Naruto responded with an exasperated eye roll. Hajime raised a brow and asked Naruto to get up. Kaze glanced toward Yuki and asked who she was. Naruto explained that Yuki was his sister and that she wanted them to go together and dress alike. Yuki waved. Hajime reminded Naruto that they needed to leave because the first exams would be starting soon. Naruto nodded, and he and Yuki said their goodbyes before they left. Yuki wondered aloud whether there would be ruthless junior ninjas this year. Naruto decided to pretend he had not heard. As usual, people stared at them with curiosity and surprise. Yuki provocatively taunted the crowd by suggesting they take a picture if they had never seen a beautiful woman before, which drew scornful reactions from those around them. Naruto felt his brows twitch as Yuki continued to provoke almost everyone nearby, going on and on. He was about to stand and drag Yuki away when the door opened and 4 junior ninjas entered. Team Yuki bounced over to them, chatting with words that had a hidden meaning meant to rile both sides of the 9 tails within Naruto. The sealed spirits were irritated by her attitude, but their restraints held them back. Kiba loudly announced their arrival with his team. Shino acknowledged that they had come as well. Kiba confidently declared they would take everyone down and patted Sasuke on the back, provoking a scoff from Sasuke and a light shove in response. Hinata greeted them while glancing toward Menma with a blush. Ino appeared and leapt towards Sasuke, exclaiming how glad she was to see him. Sakura reacted angrily, and a squabble began between the 2 girls. Shikamaru entered lazily, complaining about the trouble. Menma noted their presence, and Narumi put her hands on her hips. Narumi observed that this year's Rookie 10 were competing. Yuki smiled and felt annoyed when her moment in the spotlight was interrupted. Ino narrowed her eyes, asking who Yuki was. Sakura pointed out that Yuki had no headband to show her village affiliation. Naruto stood and walked toward the Leaf Village rookies, drawing attention from the girls, who gushed that he was handsome. Kiba teased that Naruto looked like a girly boy who wore a dress, and the two fangirls punched him in response, shouting that he was wrong and declaring Naruto cool like a prince. Naruto coldly told Yuki to stop causing a scene and reminded her they were there to compete, not picnic. Yuki indignantly denied causing a fuss. Naruto said both of his eyes and several witnesses had seen the disturbance and then grasped Yuki's wrist and began to pull her away. Menma called out for identification, sensing that Naruto's tone and voice were familiar. Naruto replied that he had only changed his clothes and grown his hair, and that Menma's poor memory was to blame. The two fangirls giggled again. Narumi blinked in recognition and several teams stared at Naruto. Sakura murmured that it was Dr. Soto. Ino asked if Sakura knew him, and Sakura admitted it had only been a brief encounter but spoke with a touch of pride. Kiba muttered that the dangerous brat now had a sister as well. Kabuto walked over and warned everyone to keep quiet because they were entering exams, not a picnic. Menma asked who Kabuto was. Kabuto introduced himself as Yakushi Kabuto and said he was something of a veteran in the exams. This was his 7th attempt and that he usually looked out for the Leaf Ninjas. He smiled and adjusted his glasses, which flashed briefly. Naruto silently assessed Kabuto's chakra and thought it was almost at Jonin level. Yuki telepathically warned Naruto not to be deceived by Kabuto's appearance. Kabuto offered to share information and produced a deck of cards that needed chakra to reveal. He asked if anyone had targets in mind. Sasuke named Gaara from Sunagakure, and Yuki inquired about Dr. Soto. Narumi answered for herself. Kabuto summoned 3 floating cards. He told Sasuke about Gaara from the Sand Village, noting impressive past records in B and C rank missions and warning that Gaara was someone to watch. He then spoke about Dr. Soto, saying that despite his changed appearance he was still a medical ninja and that his records focused on medical skills. Kabuto advised avoiding his intense glare and handed the information to Menma. Kabuto added that Soto also carried a sword, suggesting knowledge of swordsmanship. For Yuki, Kabuto admitted he had little information because she had only recently arrived, but he noted she was Sotaru's twin and likely skilled with illusion techniques. He handed the final card to Narumi. Kabuto then reminded them that many candidates from every village had entered this year, including the newly established Sound Village. He mentioned that the Pleasure Village had also sent Sotaru and Yuki, who were among the few close to junior ninja age from that village and had come to earn funds. Kabuto remarked that they were not that noteworthy before he dodged a punch aimed at him. He managed to avoid the blow, but his glasses cracked and he staggered back, visibly ill for a moment. Yuki scoffed that they were not noteworthy and thought the Kabuto figure gave off the scent of a deceptive snake. She compared him silently to Orochimaru and glanced briefly at the Kusa Genin with a small, humorless chuckle. She took note that the man hid his nature well and resolved that if he ever tried to come after their notes or the laboratory that had benefited Naruto and herself, she would not hesitate to crush him. The thought left a cold smile on her face. Later, Naruto stared down at the test paper, incredulous that this was the exam. He thought it absurd to expect Genin not to cheat and silently mocked the idea that the proctors might as well ask for the moon. The early questions were easy for him, but he hesitated on the Kaga level and ANBU level questions, numbers 7 through 9. Many of the obvious Genin were resorting to cheating, and those who were most blatant were being called out. Naruto's eyes swept the room and landed on his seatmate, Sabaku no Gaara. Gaara was using his sand-eye technique to look at answers. Naruto smirked and let a chill spread from his fingers across his table. The frost covered Gaara's paper. Gaara finished his test, then blinked in surprise when frost appeared on his sheet. Following the trail of frost, he saw Naruto sitting beside him. Naruto quickly wrote answers onto the frozen paper, and as the frost vanished the answers remained. Naruto gave a nod of thanks to Gaara for the unspoken cooperation, but Gaara treated him as if he were not there. Yuki, sitting between Shikamaru and Chuji, signaled mentally for question 9 and wrote down the answers. She leaned back with a sigh and offered a chilling, predatory smile when Ibiki surveyed the room and his gaze met hers, then forced it to vanish so quickly that he wondered if he had imagined it. Naruto observed the others. Narumi beside him was growing frustrated with what to write. Menma whispered to a blushing Hyuga, and Sakura appeared intelligent but distracted when an Uchiha teammate was nearby. The Uchiha used his Sharingan, just another typical member of that clan. Naruto mocked inwardly whether these children were the legacy of great shinobi, and when Narumi shot him a glare he responded by tapping the table. Frost spread over Narumi's test paper and then dissolved into a puddle. The water slid toward Naruto like a harmless, animated ribbon and reformed into paper so that Naruto could write the answers before it returned to Narumi. Narumi wanted to protest but swallowed her retorts. The anger burned behind her eyes. Ibiki announced that time was up, drawing the candidates' attention. He explained that the 10th question would test their courage and resistance to interrogation. He warned that failure would prevent them from taking the exam for the next 2 years, effectively leaving them as genin indefinitely. The candidates protested loudly at the harsh consequence. Yuki retorted haughtily that they had signed up to be shinobi and were expected to obey their superiors. The proctor's word was law. Some genin began to drop out under the pressure. Naruto watched, intending to unsettle more of them into leaving, but Menma suddenly shouted defiantly that he was not afraid and that he would become Hokage one day, refusing to be cowed. Naruto suppressed the discouraging words he had planned. Menma's naivete and resolve were striking. Ibiki asked those remaining to step forward. He then revealed that the 9 earlier questions were not meaningless. Sotoro, arms crossed and eyes closed as he leaned back, explained that the initial questions were meant to test information-gathering skills, the way a shinobi would obtain answers in the field. The proctors had planted several chunin in the room who knew the correct answers. The candidates were expected to get answers from them or use their own wits. Those who had been eliminated had been spotted by the planted chunin and metaphorically killed by the proctor's device, which marked their desks. Those who remained had used acceptable methods. The real purpose of the 10th question was to test who could endure the pressure and maintain their mission when faced with interrogation. Naruto listened, his calm demeanor drawing irritation from some of the other genin but respect from the chunin, jonin, and observers. Even in stillness, he conveyed an understated confidence that signaled he should not be underestimated. Naruto explained that the test was meant to judge whether they were cowards. He then looked up and met Ibiki's gaze, a flash of challenge passing between them. Ibiki chuckled in response and confirmed Naruto's deduction. A moment later, a black blur crashed through the nearby window, scattering kunai across the floor and ceiling. A banner unfurled to reveal a bold, colorful announcement presenting Mitarashi Anko as the second proctor. Anko introduced herself with a fist pump and a loud, brash tone, making many of the junior ninjas shiver. Ibiki stepped out from behind the banner and exchanged a few terse comments with her. Anko teased him about growing soft, and he shrugged, unfazed. She warned that she would have their numbers by the time she was finished, then leaped out the broken window, and ordered the students to follow her to the exam site. The junior ninjas filed toward the door, but Sotoro remained seated. Yuki approached and bowed slightly as Sotoro asked Menma to stay because he had something to ask. The rookie group lingered as well, and Team Guy stood by the doorway along with Ibiki and a few mid-level ninjas. Sotoro, still amused, observed that Menma seemed to want to become the village leader. He told Menma that he was walking that path both well and recklessly. When Menma demanded clarification, Sotaro suggested that Menma had a talent for sending people into danger. Menma bristled at the accusation. Naruto rose and said that Ibiki had been testing them to weed out the weak and that he and Yuki had pushed some to give up. Shikamaru noted that the younger students were simply not ready. Naruto agreed and pointed out that the exam had been run as a survival-type test in the past, which explained why so many dropped out by the second round. He told Menma that encouraging students to press on could amount to sending them to their deaths. The choice to forfeit often came from a desire to preserve their own lives and the lives of their teammates. Naruto reminded Menma that sacrifice and difficult decisions were part of leadership, and suggested he speak with his father if he did not understand. Yuki added that the current exam was dangerous, warning of the threat posed by the sound forces and reminding them of Kabuto's warnings about Gaara, who had an unusually impressive mission record and displayed a frightening intensity. Yuki challenged their readiness and urged them to think carefully before risking lives. Naruto and Yuki then walked out together, leaving a tense silence behind as Naruto slammed the door. Neji told Satoru he was looking forward to facing him in battle. Satoru gave a nod of acknowledgement. Lee praised the youthful resolve, and Tenten laughed softly. The others remarked that it was time for the students to face real obstacles. Naruto and Yuki headed for Training Ground 44 at a brisk pace, with Team Guy joining them. Those who remained in the room were stunned into silence. Menma considered Sotaru's words for a moment before a grim smile crossed his face in understanding. The rest of the group moved toward the exam site while Ibiki chuckled softly. Minato, watching the proceedings on a screen, folded his fingers and rested his elbows on the table, his bangs casting a shadow over his eyes. Kakashi observed that Satoru was sharper and more perceptive than most children his age. His gaze carried a coldness and a maturity beyond his years. Minato commented that Satoru was not a simple character, and Kushina admitted that his sharpness sometimes unnerved her. Kimiko remarked that Satoru reminded her of Naruto. Irika nodded in agreement, recalling how brilliant and precise Naruto had been as a student. The group reflected quietly on how frighteningly influential genetics could be. Naruto and Yuki stood together under the shade of a large tree, watching the activity around the training area. Yuki grinned as Anko continued to intimidate the junior ninjas, then turned to the towering trees with a smug expression and claimed she knew the forest of death better than anyone, calling it her domain. Naruto tilted his head in surprise and noted that the cave where he had found Yuki had been on the border of this training ground. Yuki confirmed that fact. Yuki explained that every winter only her snow could touch the training ground. The snow held her chakra and mapped the whole area. She admitted to herself that this would be considered cheating. Naruto nodded and wondered how he had been able to enter her den without being pushed back by a barrier. Yuki smiled mysteriously and said she simply wanted to be out. Fearing she would regret not seizing the opportunity, she found his generation intriguing. She giggled, covered her mouth with slender fingers, and winked. Naruto chuckled quietly and made a mental note. It was clear Yuki was not ready to reveal everything, and that Naruto was not quite ready to be told. Anko instructed everyone to take the forms and record their last wills so that Konoha, and she in particular, would not be held responsible for any deaths. Menma flinched at the announcement. Naruto took a form, signed it, and smiled to himself. Yuki, whose thoughts ran as deep and wide as the waters of the Land of Waves, produced a packet of 2 popsicles and handed one to Naruto so he could finish the paperwork. Naruto shook his head and noted that she could have filled it out herself. Yuki bargained that he should fill his half and she would give him the other half. Naruto raised a brow and finished the form, then accepted the second popsicle. The two leaned against a tree and ate as if they were at the park, drawing sneers from the other genins. Most of the genins assumed this was a picnic and dismissed them with ridicule. Yuki asked rhetorically whether they had never seen a beautiful pair of twins and added a haughty remark that only provoked disbelief and anger. Many of the kunoichi simmered with jealousy. They agreed Yuki was beautiful and her companion unusually handsome and mysterious. Some silently hoped she would fail the exams. Naruto sighed and asked her to stop antagonizing others. Anko laughed and patted Yuki on the shoulder, praising her spirited attitude, then ushered the teams to line up for scroll assignments. The 2 representatives drew a heaven scroll. Naruto pulled a raffle slip to determine which gate they would start from and read Gate. Yuki grimaced momentarily, then brightened. She explained that Gate 1 consisted mostly of rivers with very little land, so they would need a boat. Naruto agreed that the current would carry them to the tower quickly. They stood before their gate appearing calm and relaxed, as if taking a walk on the beach. Anko called the start of the exam. The gates opened, and instead of moving straight ahead, Naruto and Yuki turned sharply left and dashed toward the nearest team. They landed on a branch and observed the team debating who should receive a heaven scroll. Yuki spoke up and offered to resolve the dispute herself. The 3 genins were surprised at their speed. One kunoichi from the opposing team voiced displeasure at Yuki's attitude. They were from the Sound Village and refused to hand over the scroll. Yuki flipped her hair and scoffed that she was merely helping to solve the problem, then leaned on the tree with arms crossed. When the team resisted, they were startled to find the scroll missing. Naruto had quietly taken it, holding it up with a smile. He remarked that thievery was common in the Pleasure Village and implied they had learned a few practical tricks. The other team stared dumbfounded as Naruto and Yuki waved and vanished. The three genins were left wondering how such capable opponents could be genins. After leaving the area, Naruto produced a small boat from his storage scroll. He always came prepared. They boarded the boat and let the river current carry them downstream. Yuki asked to steer, took the lead, and Naruto reclined to read a book. Observers in the monitoring room watched as the Pleasure Village representatives rowed a boat for nearly 2 hours before docking and entering the tower, breaking the usual time records. Kushina commented that the pair were likely the fastest to finish the survival portion of the exam, lazy in appearance yet clever in taking advantage of their environment. With their initial objective accomplished, Yuki suggested they relax for the remainder of the 5-day test. The two sat on the couch and read their books. Hours later their attention snapped to the doorway as the Sand siblings stood there, watching. Gaara glared with a crazed intensity and declared that their mother wanted Naruto's blood. Naruto raised a brow and refused, telling Gaara he was not a blood bag. Observers were shocked by Naruto's audacity. Two of them nervously turned to their younger brother, who still had that crazed look on his face. Naruto closed his book and told Yuki that he was heading out. He passed Gaara on his way to the door, meeting Gaara's heated glare with his own cold expression. Their gazes clashed like sparks before Naruto continued toward the exit. Yuki giggled as she watched. Yuki then casually asked if anyone wanted to do anything. Naruto stepped outside the tower and heard bushes rustle. He found a limping rabbit with brown fur, clearly injured and in need of help. Naruto approached gently and reassured the animal that he would not hurt it. Fond of fluffy things despite his outward pose, he picked the rabbit up and promised to take care of it before returning to the tower. Inside, Naruto began treating the rabbit, carefully cleaning and tending to its wounds and stabilizing its limbs using healing chakra. He trimmed matted fur to make the bandages fit better, which made Yuki laugh at the rabbit's half-shaved appearance. The rabbit looked affronted, but Naruto smiled as he soothed it, and its rich brown coat gradually brightened as Naruto adjusted the healing technique. Yuki found the transformation amusing, laughing again as Naruto stroked the now white fur. Naruto told the rabbit he would let the fur grow back. The next day he continued tending the animal, channeling chakra to fully mend the injuries and using a restorative technique Yuki had shown him to encourage the fur to regrow. He decided to name the rabbit Snowball. Yuki teased Naruto about his choice of name, elbowing him playfully. Naruto only shrugged and, finding a blue collar in his scroll, adjusted it and placed it on Snowball with the name and owner's tag. He settled into a comfortable position while Yuki's hand itched to draw on his face, but she went off in search of another target instead. Unnoticed, grains of sand began to shift at the doorway and creep into the room. Naruto, thinking the movement was Snowball finding a new spot, did not immediately react as the sand wound around him. Gaara activated a sand technique and the sand tightened to immobilize Naruto, the atmosphere growing tense with his presence. Naruto's eyes shot open in alarm as he found himself momentarily trapped. He read Gaara's expression and understood the challenge he faced. Before the sand could fully pin him, Naruto gathered a burst of chakra that turned the sudden threat into a wash of water, causing the sand to slump harmlessly to the ground. The water formed around Naruto, and in an instant he reappeared near the couch with frost forming beneath his feet. Gaara, surprised, shook off falling grains of sand and found himself soaked. Naruto glared coldly, unsheathing his sword to make his point clear. Gaara glared back, and Naruto warned him to think twice before challenging someone stronger, making it clear that he would not always be so merciful. Naruto then picked up Snowball and left in a swirl of snowflakes. Later, Yuki held Snowball with a mischievous grin and joked about how she preferred rabbit meat. Snowball panicked inwardly, pleading silently for his master to save him. Yuki produced a kitchen knife, the blade glinting, and Snowball's fear grew. Before Yuki could act, Naruto moved in and grasped her wrist firmly. He scolded her for what she was doing. Yuki stubbornly insisted she was hungry, and Naruto sighed before producing a scroll and offering 2 roasted chickens to calm her. Naruto untied the rabbit's bindings and smoothed Snowball's fur, then tensed when he sensed a malicious chakra nearby, an influence associated with Orochimaru, though not entirely his alone. Curious and alert, Naruto suggested they investigate. With Snowball cradled against his chest, Naruto stepped from the undergrowth and narrowly avoided a sudden gust of wind from the ongoing skirmish. The battle paused as Naruto emerged. Sasuke, caught in a cursed state, used the opportunity to cripple an opponent. Naruto moved to Sakura and placed Snowball in her arms, warning her fiercely that he would be unforgiving if anything happened to the rabbit. Sakura hesitated and then nodded, holding Snowball carefully while he squirmed uneasily. Naruto then took hold of Sasuke's wrist and pulled him back as the Uchiha lunged to attack the other young genins. Sasuke snarled at Naruto, glaring with hostility. Naruto accused Sasuke of weakness, challenging the direction his anger had taken. Naruto glared back at Sasuke and accused him of relying on a power that was not his. Sasuke fell silent as Naruto coldly pointed out the tainted chakra running through his veins, the arrogance it fed, and the urge to overpower everyone. Naruto demanded whether defeating his brother with borrowed power would ever feel satisfying. Sasuke froze. The 3-pronged curse mark on his neck began to recede. The Sound Junior ninja watched in astonishment. Naruto had managed to quell the curse mark's surge with only words. Sasuke lost the strength to stand and collapsed onto Naruto, who stumbled back beneath the weight. Naruto noted that earlier he had cleared Sasuke's mind by placing chakra into his system to ward off the tainted energy and had chained that influence to the back of his awareness. It would hold for now, long enough for Minato and Kushina to act, Naruto thought, staring at the curse mark with a complicated, helpless expression. Dozu announced that they would leave and set a scroll on the ground before lifting his teammates and departing, though he felt a chilling glare on his back. Naruto watched them go, then looked back at Sasuke's pained face and the others. Naruto instructed everyone to gather the injured and declared that he would treat them. He laid Sasuke on the ground, and when Ino asked cautiously why they should trust him, Naruto explained that it was his duty to heal rather than harm. He told them they could accept his help or refuse, either way he would do his job. He placed his hands over Sasuke's chest and began to work. He healed Sasuke and tended to the battered Sakura and Rock Lee, patched up Chuji and Ino, and checked the seals on Menma and Urumi. His hands glowed as he pressed into the twins' stomachs, jolting them awake and sending them flying a short distance from the force. They crashed to the ground and awoke startled. Naruto explained that he had removed a seal that had interfered with their chakra control and that keeping the seal would only make using chakra more difficult. The twins were prevented from protesting before they could. Yuki entered the clearing and announced that there was an announcement at the tower. Naruto picked Snowball up from Sakura's hand and, with Yuki, left without saying goodbye. Kiba raised an eyebrow as Akamaru pawed at the white bunny. Hinata smiled at the pair playing together. Akamaru barked playfully. The bunny protested and landed a small kick that sent Akamaru reeling. Naruto entered the room and knelt to pick up Snowball. The bunny seemed relieved at his presence. He looked toward Team Kurenai, who were staring at him. Kiba teased Naruto, calling him a girly boy, and Naruto stared blankly before settling the bunny more comfortably in his arms. He nodded to Inazaka, Hyuga, and Aburame and then exited. Akamaru slipped out after him despite Kiba's protests, driven by the smell of barbecue chicken. In the kitchen, Yuki was eating a pile of meat. Naruto sat with a bowl of ramen and placed Snowball on the table beside a plate of chopped carrots and greens. Akamaru protested at being left out, so Naruto took a slab of meat from Yuki's plate and set it before the dog. Akamaru immediately settled and ate with obvious approval. Seeing there was more ramen left in the pot, Naruto poured another bowl. The kitchen door opened and he felt a familiar glare. He recognized Gaara standing in the doorway and set a bowl at the empty chair. Naruto told Gaara, plainly, that if he was hungry he should eat. There was nothing poisonous. Gaara hesitated, tempted to strike but unwilling to risk the consequences. His inner voice warned him not to anger the woman nearby, and he kept his silence. He cautiously walked to the table, sat down, and began to eat. He watched Naruto as he ate, noticed the bunny on the table and the dog on the floor, which was still keeping its plate tucked beneath Naruto's chair. The 5-day time limit had ended. Many teams still needed to go through preliminary exams to reduce the field. Naruto glanced at Team 7 as they arrived a few hours later, most of them exhausted. The proctor instructed that when a name was called, each competitor and their opponent would come forward to battle for advancement into the next round. Names were called and matches began. When the pairing for Yuki came up against a female ninja from the waterfall village, the challenger felt she had hit the jackpot. She grinned arrogantly and strode toward the center, while Yuki waited calmly, appearing bored and unruffled. The challenger taunted Yuki as she approached, attempting to rattle her composure. Yuki smirked and ruffled the feathers of the female ninja in front of her, remarking that there were no photographers present. Mizume erupted in a shouted insult and pointed at Yuki. Yuki laughed and scolded her for pointing, saying it was rude and that losing control would make her lose face. Mizume ground her teeth and vowed she would make Yuki pay. The proctor announced they should prepare, and the match began. Yuki laughed as she twirled away from the barrage of daggers, throwing stars, and needles that Mizume sent at her. Mizume felt her anger climb as Yuki dodged every weapon. Yuki produced a dragon-themed fan crafted and reinforced with her own scales from her true form. She waved the fan, deflecting the projectiles and sending them back toward Mizume with twice the force and speed. Boasting and spinning like a ballerina, Yuki taunted Mizume for her best effort. Riled up, Mizume gathered chakra and moved through the necessary seals to form a water dragon. With no nearby water source, the technique cost her dearly and quickly depleted half her chakra. The water dragon that formed was smaller than average but fierce and fast. Mizume strained to control it, but Yuki only laughed and swept the fan to create a powerful gust of wind. The gust struck the water dragon and dispersed it into scattered water. Caught off guard by the blast, Mizume was knocked back and slammed into the arena wall, falling unconscious. The announcer declared Yuki the winner. Yuki grinned, struck a triumphant pose, and boasted that she was cool, drawing annoyed looks from those nearby. The next match was Satoru versus Seiyo of the Uchiha clan. Naruto smirked, thinking an Uchiha would make things more interesting. Satoru walked toward the center at a deliberate pace, calmly stroking the fur of the bunny in his arms. The bunny, Snowball, protested that he had no fighting experience and questioned why he had been brought into the battle. Naruto soothed him and assured him nothing would happen. Snowball had grown plump from the food Naruto had been feeding him over the past few days. The proctor signaled the start, and the bout began. Both fighters activated the Uchiha visual technique before taking the classic Uchiha intercepting stance. Naruto remained calm, standing as if admiring the scenery, which irritated Seiyo and made him think Naruto was looking down on him. Seiyo struck first, forming seals and launching a massive fireball. Naruto evaded it effortlessly, disappearing from sight and appearing a few feet to the left, remarking that Seiyo's Uchiha visual technique was only at its second level and therefore not especially threatening. Naruto moved with blistering speed, appearing and vanishing in rapid afterimages that made him seem everywhere around Seiyo at once. Even Lee, one of the fastest low-level ninja present aside from Yuki, had trouble keeping up. Several elite ninja watched in stunned silence as Naruto's movement resembled the legendary Yellow Flash's Thunder God technique. Mid-level and elite ninja concluded with cold sweat that this child was far beyond the usual limits for his rank and that it was almost laughable he was still labeled a low-level ninja. Seiyo gritted his teeth as he struggled under the relentless flurry of kicks and strikes that fell like a storm. He could not defend effectively against an opponent so fast and unpredictable. Naruto delivered a final, precise strike, appearing behind Seiyo and rendering him unconscious. Before Seiyo could hit the ground and lose dignity, Naruto caught him by the collar and gently set him down. The announcer declared Satoru the winner. Observers noted that the Pleasure Village's arrogance had likely grown in recent years because they possessed highly skilled shinobi. Naruto hummed softly as he watched the matches, frowning when Gaara nearly left Rock Lee severely injured. Concerned, Naruto hurried down to follow the medics and observe their work. He stood to the side as Hajime tended to Lee's wounds while Kaze assisted by checking for internal damage. Lee had been badly beaten and was exhausted from opening the gates. Another stretcher arrived carrying the Hyuga heiress. Kaze rushed to her and reported that she needed urgent care. One of the medics admitted their team was short-staffed and that inexperience could be a hindrance. Naruto stepped forward and volunteered to perform Lee's surgery and asked Hajime to assist with the Hyuga heiress instead. The others turned to him and expressed their thanks. Naruto retrieved a medical scroll, changed behind a curtain, donned a mask, and handed Snowball to a surprised medic, urging them to hold the bunny. He put on surgical gloves, reassured Lee that he would be able to walk again, and then created 5 shadow clones to assist with the procedures. They quickly set to work. Yuki sharpened her nails and gave off a cool, unbothered air, like a princess who expected deference. No one openly dared to rebuke her. She backed up her arrogance with skill and a sharp tongue. The proctor announced that the competitors would draw numbers to determine matchups, and everyone drew names. The drawn list read: Gaara of the Sand, Sasuke of the Uchiha clan, Sou, Niji of the Hyuga, Kankuro of the Sand, Shino of the Aburame clan, Temari of the Sand, Shikamaru of the Nara clan, Yuki, Dosu, Narumi, and Menma. Soter was not present at the moment, so Yuki ended up drawing 2 names. She did not particularly want to face the Hyuga for her own reasons. Yuki bristled at the thought of the brats spouting about fate and other nonsense. She yawned as she headed to the hospital, not because she was injured but because she wanted to tell Naruto about his upcoming match in a month and borrow money for barbecue. In the corridor, Yuki asked who the spandex-clad taijutsu fanatic was and why an adult version of the little one was in the ICU under her brother's care. Mato Guy burst in exuberantly, loudly thanking Yuki's twin for treating his favorite student, Lee, and for lending clones to help Tenten. Nurses frowned and patients poked their heads out, bewildered by the commotion. Niji felt embarrassed by his sensei's antics. Yuki cut him off, insisting that congratulating her for her brother healing someone had nothing to do with her and that she had done nothing to deserve such high praise. She warned that people might misinterpret Guy's words and asked him to tone it down because talk of youth annoyed her. Guy nodded vigorously but promptly sulked. Niji rolled his eyes as Yuki walked past them and entered the room without warning. Yuki told Naruto that his younger brother would be fighting Hyuga Niji in a month and that the battle was in the 2nd round. Naruto acknowledged the news while still tending to Lee's arm and leg. Yuki mentioned she was hungry. One of Naruto's shadow clones tossed a blue pouch to her, and Naruto called out good wishes. Yuki thanked him, promised dinner would be ready later, waved and left, shutting the door behind her. The medical staff muttered that Yuki had barged in like she owned the place. Dr. Soter did not seem to mind, which suggested she did this often. Some worried it could be dangerous if the doctor were distracted, but others reminded themselves that Dr. Soter was exceptionally skilled and precise, and they admired his talent. Naruto closed his eyes and sighed. Instead of training for the final rounds, he was amusing himself by teaching his bunny to behave like a house pet. He did not worry much about Niji. He had watched Niji train and understood how he fought and moved. According to Maze, the current clan head Haishur had once had a twin, Hizashi. Haishur, as the elder, had become clan heir while Hizashi had been demoted to a branch. Years ago, when a peace treaty with Kumogakure was in effect, the clan heiress had been kidnapped. Haishur discovered the situation and had accidentally killed the kidnapper, who had been a Kumo envoy. Kumo demanded compensation and insisted Haishur be sent to them. Hizashi, being the twin, volunteered to take Haishi's place because he bore the cage bird seal that protected the Byakugan's secrets. From then on, Niji had harbored resentment toward the main branch. Naruto asked whether Hizashi had really died. Kaze answered that no one knew for sure. Hizashi had not been sent back, and people assumed he had died. Naruto smiled and shrugged, accepting that uncertainty. Naruto handed a scroll to Yuki. After reading it, Yuki complained all day and then left, saying she was returning to Pleasure Village to look for her senior and train. Naruto did not follow then, but a week later he asked Minato for permission to take Hyuga Niji to Pleasure Village to meet someone. Minato was hesitant and chose to send Uchiha Shisui and Uchiha Itachi along with them to keep watch. Naruto retrieved Nana from the stable, paid the keeper, and mounted her saddle. Neji scoffed at the unnecessary ride but stayed silent. Naruto checked that everyone was ready, they nodded, and he urged Nana toward the gates. His bunny, Snowball, complained of dizziness, and Naruto soothed it by covering it with chakra until it felt better. 4 days later, they arrived surprisingly quickly because they had taken few breaks. Naruto's in a message to the leader with a pigeon before returning Nana to his territory. He dismounted, retrieved his bag, and patted Nana on the snout, praising her. A shadow clone appeared to take Nana to the stable to rest and eat. Naruto led the others into his clinic. Passing shadow clones who were tending to people with bruises and scrapes evidence of another fight, he guided them upstairs. Yuki lay on a couch, relaxed, while Naruto set Snowball down. The large room had a white, blue, and purple theme. Yuki explained that the man in the bed had been in serious trouble when she found him and that it had taken a while to get him out. She added that Naruto's clones had given him their utmost care and that he would survive. Naruto tossed a red scroll to Yuki. She unsealed it and found a huge pile of pork barbecue ribs, which she promptly began eating. Naruto asked them to wait while he went to the door Yuki had indicated. Yuki suggested they take a shower because the place smelled sweaty. Naruto entered and saw the man lying on the bed connected to many machines. He looked very ill, and Naruto suspected he had looked worse before Yuki had brought him in. He was really thin, his face sunken and his arms gaunt. His skin clung to his bones. Naruto could still see in his eyes that he wanted to live. Naruto approached and asked if Hisashi wished to see his son, Neji. Hisashi asked who Naruto was, his voice weak but steady. Naruto introduced himself as Dr. Soto, Yuki's younger brother, and said he had brought Neji. Hisashi refused, saying he did not want his son to see him in that state. Naruto argued that Neji would care more about seeing his long-thought-dead father alive after 9 years than about appearances. Hisashi wondered why Naruto had gone to such trouble. Naruto explained that he was doing a favor for himself and for Konoha, tired of Neji's insistence about fate and destiny. Naruto left the room, leaving Hisashi confused. Naruto returned with Neji and warned him to pull himself together and not to faint. Neji scoffed but froze when he saw the man in the bed. Both stared wide-eyed at one another. Hisashi smiled at Neji and noted how much his son had grown. Neji stuttered in disbelief at seeing his father. Naruto patted Neji's shoulder and left them alone, closing the door softly behind him. Itachi and Shisui wondered who was behind the door, but Yuki said it was a private matter. A doctor could not disclose a patient's privacy without permission. She distracted them by placing 5 plates of sweet dumplings in front of them. Itachi was immediately occupied and dropped the subject, while Shisui pouted before reluctantly joining in. Naruto walked over cradling Snowball and fed it cabbage leaves. He did not know how long Neji would remain inside, so he had his shadow clones deliver food for both Neji and Hisashi and hurried off. The 2 ANBU captains remained curious about who the Hyuga had been meeting, but Naruto only smiled and shook his head. He explained that, as a doctor, he was trying to treat their physiology and to let them speak and heal each other's mental and emotional wounds. They needed that. Yuki rolled her eyes. Yuki could influence Naruto, but he was still human and still felt emotions. Sometimes those emotions made him too open. She wondered if pushing him to become a doctor had been a mistake, then dismissed the thought. If villagers or merchants had no money to pay Naruto, they often offered medical plants, rare poisons, or food instead. Yuki did not mind. It saved Naruto the trouble of traveling the elemental nations for herbs and seeds. Yuki glanced at a pile of meat and shook her head, then took another bite and began eating. Shisui wondered aloud how she did not become bloated from all the food. Naruto explained that she had an enormous metabolism and burned anything she ate in hours, which made her constantly hungry. He also explained that Yuki stored half of what she demanded in her personal storage space, where time did not pass and food stayed well preserved. Naruto sighed at Yuki's eccentric habits. Naruto turned to Itachi and asked about his brother, noting that Sasuke had a curse mark. Itachi said the mark had not yet been removed and that the Hokage and Lady Kushina had not managed to break it down. Naruto asked whether they were able to separate Sasuke's mind from the curse mark. Itachi confirmed they could, but only every 2 weeks. Unlike Anko's curse mark, Sasuke's was stronger and harder to restrain. Naruto went to his room, pulled a small rosewood box from under his bed, and placed it in front of Itachi. He said the box would help. He explained that he was still studying the curse mark and had used someone as a test subject. That person no longer colluded with Orochimaru and lived in the pleasure village, information Naruto could not disclose. The box contained a talisman that would only open for someone who truly wished healing for the marked person. Those with ill intent would be unable to open it. Naruto instructed that placing the talisman on the curse mark would cause it to dissolve into the skin and that the process should be repeated every 3 months. He explained that the stronger Sasuke's will to resist the tainted power, and the more he refrained from using it, the stronger the barrier would be. If Sasuke tapped that power, the seal would break and they would have to bring him back to himself and apply another seal. Shisui asked what Naruto wanted in exchange. Naruto asked only that they not disclose who Neji had been meeting. Itachi and Shisui paused, then agreed. The council would surely be curious about a seal better than what the fourth had and about Kushina's involvement, but for now the agreement stood. Naruto then asked why Itachi had the chakra virus in his system. Both Itachi and Shisui froze in shock. Itachi wondered how Naruto could know without diagnosing him, thinking even Konoha's doctors or Tsunade would be needed to cure it. Naruto replied that he already knew because he had treated a similar patient who had died when it was too late. Itachi, however, was still in an early stage and could live if treated. Shisui frowned, wondering who this doctor truly was. Naruto smirked, having recognized the signs in Itachi's alert Sharingan eyes, and teased that the senior had been lazy and might have benefited from wearing glasses. Naruto found Itachi's habit of constantly using the Sharingan inconvenient. He rested his chin on his arm, propped his elbow on the table, and stroked Snowball's fur, which had somehow hopped onto the tabletop. Shisui inwardly complained that they had not considered that, and he found it embarrassing for Itachi to wear glasses. Naruto offered to help, but said it would cost money. Itachi answered firmly that they were willing to pay. Naruto explained the chakra virus. He described it as a virus within the chakra system whose origin was unknown. The larger the chakra reserves, the more the infection multiplied. The more chakra was used, the tougher the virus became. It was difficult to remove, and constant use of the Sharingan only made the problem worse. For that reason, Naruto proposed a new device and sent a shadow clone to fetch it. The clone returned quickly with a clear glass case containing 2 black flat circular earrings and a pair of black-rimmed glasses. Naruto explained that the earrings, worn at all times, would create a seal and an illusion barrier around the glasses so the wearer would not feel embarrassed by them. Only the wearer could touch the glasses. To everyone else they would be treated like air. If the glasses were lost, a drop of the wearer's blood placed on an earring would return them. If the earrings were lost, the glasses would revert to normal. The glasses were equipped with a sensor and a small camera to project an image for a damaged eye and connected to the optical nerves. Naruto called them hologram glasses. When Itachi asked the price, Naruto chuckled and said the cost was significant, though he would accept rare medical herbs, seeds, poisons, or meat of equivalent value in trade. Shisui thought it was outrageous, feeling Naruto was shamelessly trying to rob them in broad daylight, but Naruto laughed and shook his head. Naruto emphasized his creation's capabilities: night vision, clear performance underwater, the ability to project images even if the eyes were closed or muddy, dust-proofing, and an adaptability comparable to the Byakugan. His tone changed to a cold, businesslike manner as he argued that it was worth the price. Yuki smirked at the scene, knowing that the device relied on seals to transform an otherwise ordinary pair of glasses into something exceptional. Shisui sighed and accepted the terms. Itachi pushed a blue scroll across his payment. Naruto nodded and handed over the glass case. Itachi stared for a moment, then Naruto helped him put the glasses on. When the glasses settled on his face, they shimmered and became unobtrusive. Shisui poked lightly at Itachi's closed eyelids to test them and felt no restriction. Naruto added that treatment would cost the same and checked his watch. He told Yuki they were heading out for a while. When Yuki asked where, Naruto said they were going to the Pleasure Village's treasure chest auction house because a rare treasure would be there, and he stroked Snowball's fur. The two Uchiha followed as Naruto led them to the underground auction house. At the entrance, Naruto approached the guard and flashed a black crystal card with gold lettering. The guards opened the VIP door and bowed. Naruto instructed them to disguise themselves. He retrieved a white cloak and a white porcelain mask from his scroll, each bearing a blue dragon design, and the Uchiha took black cloaks and white porcelain masks from a stand before following him to their seats. Naruto led them to the highest seat in the auction house and sat on a lavish chair. He snapped his fingers and an attendant approached, her accessories jingling as she moved. Naruto requested 2 additional chairs and some snacks, then flashed his card. The attendant's manner shifted to respectful. She bowed and hurried to fulfill the request. Shursui and Itachi were stunned by Naruto's behavior, wondering how this young man carried himself with such authority. The servants quickly prepared what had been requested and left. Naruto settled into the red velvet chair and continued to slide Snowball's fur. Although he appeared relaxed, the presence he radiated was intense, causing the people around him to shrink back and remain seated, subdued by the pressure of his dramatic, controlled aura. They kept their heads low and tried to make their presence as small as possible. Shursui wondered where this overwhelmingly powerful figure had come from. Naruto spoke coldly, making it clear he was not afraid if they reported him to the Hokage or the council. He would not be pushed around. Whatever demands another village had were not his concern. He insisted they were neither allies nor enemies, and reminded them that the people of Pleasure Village were pragmatic and could take care of themselves. The 2 men nodded, uneasy and impressed. Shursui felt admiration rise in him. He thought Naruto embodied the true definition of a child genius. If asked who the brightest person he had met was, Shursui would previously have answered Itachi, but seeing this young prodigy display such power, he cheered for Satoru and threw confetti in excitement. Naruto placed Snowball, his pet rabbit, on a separate table where a vegetable salad was set out and let the animal eat its fill. He picked up a glass of milk and sipped it. Despite his sharp mind, he still had simple childhood tastes and enjoyed sweets and milk. A knock came at the door. Naruto invited the visitor in, and a middle-aged steward entered with a formal bow and greeted the young master. The steward explained he had heard of Naruto's arrival and come quickly to check the arrangements. Naruto indicated they were satisfactory. Reaching into his sleeve, Naruto produced a familiar glass case and set it neatly on a silver tray, placing a small pocketbook beside it. He took out 10 vials, 5 colored and 5 containing a clear white substance, poisons and antidotes. He laid out the usual arrangement of shares, stating that 40% would go to him and 60% to the steward. The steward acknowledged and prepared the tray to be taken away. Naruto asked if the item he had requested would be auctioned that day, and the steward confirmed it would. He then excused himself to study and catalog the young master's goods before leaving with a respectful bow. Shursui remarked that Naruto's behavior was similar to Itachi's, and Naruto assured them both that he was not trying to scam them. The auction began. A man stepped onto the stage, gave an introductory speech, and the normally quiet crowd rose into animated bidding. Naruto remained relaxed and asked if either of the 2 wanted anything. Shursui demurred and said perhaps later. Naruto quietly finished his milk and watched as the others downstairs competed with money for treasures. Hours passed and the top 3 items were brought out. The first was a rare cleaning pill from overseas, said to remove impurities from the body. The bidding grew heated. A bidder in the VIP seats offered 1 billion yen. Naruto raised his fan and placed a counterbid of 3 billion yen, which stunned the room and made Shursui nearly spit out his tea. The auctioneer struck the gavel and sold the pill. The next item was a katana that drew every eye, the Raijin no Ken of the second Hokage. The significance of the heirloom for Konoha was obvious. Before any hesitation, Naruto placed another large bid, 9 billion yen. The spectators murmured in shock at the audacity. Some whispered that he must be reckless to take such a controversial piece. The auctioneer confirmed the sale after the customary calls. The final treasure, a rare pair of glasses, went to bidding and eventually sold for 28.2 billion yen. Naruto watched the proceedings with a calm smirk. This was how he secured funds without bankrupting his territory. When the auction ended, Naruto gathered his shares, paid for his purchases, and sealed the items on a scroll. He led the two back toward the VIP room. Shursui asked why they were returning, and Naruto instructed them to leave their cloak and mask behind. Naruto set a sealing tag on the door before opening the knob and stepping in. Itachi and Shursui left their cloak and mask outside as instructed and entered. The sealing tag flared and burned to ash, and in an instant they found themselves back in Naruto's house. The sudden transportation left them blinking in surprise. Shursui hurried back and opened the nearest door to check his face, registering confusion at what he found inside. Naruto removed his mask and cloak with a small smile. Later, Naruto stood on the balcony. Neji joined him, and a comfortable silence passed between them. Naruto asked if Neji was ready to return, reminding him that the final round was a week and a half away. Neji admitted he still needed to train and doubted he could beat Naruto, and Naruto chuckled at that. He challenged Neji on whether he would accept defeat without a fight. After a moment of reflection, Neji expressed his thanks. Naruto clarified that his actions had not been solely for Neji. He revealed that he sought the secrets of the cage bird seal. Naruto told Neji that the seal was peculiar and he feared Neji's clan had not realized its true potential. He wanted to study it. Neji frowned and sighed. The next morning, after saying goodbye to Hizadi, they set off. Neji remarked that he had nothing to lose. Naruto placed the same talisman on the door and opened it. He entered followed by Yuki, Itachi, and Shursui. Neji, perplexed by how they all fit, sighed, stepped in, and closed the door behind him. When Neji reopened it, the space appeared to be only a janitor's closet. Naruto urged them to move on, and they left the hotel near Konoha. Shursui asked why they did not appear directly inside Konoha's walls. Naruto said the seal had reached its limit. Shursui nodded and Yuki rolled her eyes. Naruto had no obligation to inform the Konoha shinobi. They would have turned any new discovery into a report. He was also cautious of Danzo and his root, who were ruthless and shameless. Naruto later realized his suspicion had been correct when he was summoned before the Konoha council. Yuki laughed at his misfortune, clutching her belly and pointing at him, while Naruto insisted it was not funny. Yuki mocked him for digging his own hole and told him to fix it himself. Naruto scoffed as she continued to laugh. On the way to the council, Naruto bumped into Shursui. Shursui whispered that a Yamanaka had searched their memories and then acted as if nothing had happened. Naruto understood why they were uneasy. They were being watched by both Anbu and Root. Naruto strode into the council room and greeted them coldly. Minato returned the greeting and inquired about his day, but Naruto ignored pleasantries and demanded to know their purpose. Koharu called him a rude child, and Naruto fired back that summoning someone at 3 in the morning was rude. Danzo demanded the Raijin no Ken. Naruto replied that he had won it at auction and would not hand it over without payment, naming a price of 10 billion yen. Chuza nearly choked on his coffee. A member of the civilian council called the price outrageous, and Naruto questioned her right to speak on shinobi matters, insisting only the economic council had authority on such issues. When she protested, Naruto challenged her, and she visibly restrained herself. Naruto then sat on a silver and blue chair that had appeared behind him. Koharu demanded whether his parents had taught him manners. Naruto replied that his parents had taught him nothing and took a sip of tea. Minato cleared his throat and spoke about the sword, arguing that Konoha had been inadequate to protect the Raijin no Ken. Naruto responded that the weapon had been sold at auction and that he had become its legal guardian. If the village wanted it, they should buy it from him for 10 billion yen. The council swallowed their protests as Naruto reminded them that Pleasure Village and Leaf Village were not allies and that he was neither a Konoha shinobi nor citizen bound by their rules. He introduced himself as Dr. Satoru and stated that he answered to no one. A cold aura rose around Naruto, frost forming on nearby surfaces and a palpable pressure settling over the room like an unseen force daring anyone to contradict him. He told them they had wasted his time, wished them a bad day, and stood as the chair behind him collapsed into a scatter of snow. He left and slammed the door. Once it closed, warmth returned and the room was normal again. Shikaku asked aloud who that child was and whether he was truly a child at all. Later, Naruto stood before a chunin blocking his way out of the Hokage tower and fixed him with a cold stare that made the guard break out in sweat. Naruto demanded that the chunin step aside. The chunin, voice faltering, said he could not obey because of the Hokage's orders. Naruto accused the village of holding him back from the exams through underhanded methods and said it left him speechless. The receptionist protested at his disrespect toward the Hokage. Naruto pointed out that if the Hokage were sensible he would know what day it was. He reminded them that it was the first day of the final round of the Chunin exams and that he was scheduled to fight in the second round. Naruto coldly rebuked the receptionist, accusing Konoha of being unfair for calling a meeting at 3 in the morning and suggesting they doubted their genin. The receptionist flushed with a mix of humiliation and anger and had no words to offer. She forced herself to remain composed. Naruto accused the leadership of losing sight of the Hokage's role, arguing that the village should be prosperous, strong, and safe but was instead suffering from lax guards, insufficient patrols, and even graffiti on the Hokage faces by children barely old enough to be genin. He mocked a Kage who could not assert control over the council, saying the position had become a puppet office buried under paperwork. When a chunin tried to intervene, Naruto snapped the air with a gust of wind that knocked the young shinobi off balance and sent him stumbling into Mitarashi Anko. Anko, watching the scene, dropped her dango. Naruto dismissed the incident and moved toward the arena. In the council room, the communicator's seal had been opened at exactly the right moment, and Kushina ensured everyone had heard the exchange. Minato watched the boy with a faint smile. He admired Naruto's bluntness and the confidence behind his words. When provoked, Naruto spoke with relentless logic and force, unafraid to expose flaws. Minato did not grow angry. He appreciated a voice that could back up its claims. Minato decided to take the advice. He announced that Dr. Soter was right and that the Konoha system needed reform to return to the principles of their predecessors. He declared that after the Chunin selection exams, Konoha would undergo complete changes. Minato felt a surprising pride in the stranger's boldness. Later, at the arena, Yuki remarked that Naruto was quite late. Naruto explained that he had dealt with a few troublesome people on the way. Yuki briefed him on the situation. The Uchiha had been called but his sensei, Hatake Kakashi, would likely be late. If the Uchiha were disqualified, the patriarch and matriarch would be furious with the jonin responsible. Before any decision was finalized, a chunin whispered to the proctor, and the match was allowed to proceed. Yuki and Naruto both expressed their disdain for favoritism. Heiei then announced the next match, Soter vs. Hyuga Niji. Sotaru and Niji walked side by side toward the center. Naruto told Niji that he was wearing suppressors and suggested that Niji treat it as an advantage to put on a show. Niji paused, uneasy at the implication of underhanded tactics, but Naruto continued, explaining that he was too skilled to be underestimated and that displaying strength could influence public opinion and the village's future. He advised Niji to use every trick he had to win and to secure respect, so that his father might find safety within the clan compound. Niji considered the words, then followed Naruto onto the field. They reached the middle of the arena and faced each other. Naruto casually produced a blue fan adorned with a dragon symbol and began fanning himself with relaxed, almost theatrical composure, looking as if he belonged to another era. The crowd reacted with admiration, while some teased that he looked effeminate. Others playfully scolded the mocker. Heiei reminded them to tone down the theatrics and prepared the fighters. Niji took a gentle fist stance and launched himself at Naruto, aiming to finish the fight quickly. He knew delays would only reduce his chances of victory. Naruto remained laid back, watching the sky with calm confidence as the match began. Kankuro asked, for the fun of it, whether they meant the Byakugan kid or the teleportation kid. Temari replied that no matter where the fan-wielding kid teleported, the Hyuga had 360-degree vision, and if he could manipulate it to his favor, the doctor would go down. Yuki shrugged and insisted the fighters' fates had already been decided. Yuki argued that there was no way the Hyuga could defeat her brother, since her brother was a doctor who knew acupuncture better than the Hyuga prodigy. Narumi defended Niji, But Yuki mocked Narumi's knowledge and said it was better to be able to still move than to have pressure points opened and be unable to fight. Narumi flushed with anger and embarrassment and snapped that she was not a doctor and that there was nothing wrong with supporting a comrade. Yuki countered that support should be informed. If someone blindly backed a fighter who then lost, both the supporter and the fighter would feel disappointed. Yuki turned her gaze toward Menma and advised that it was better to support quietly rather than broadcast it live. She recalled how a Hyuga heiress had suffered severe internal injuries and damage to her pride and reputation after a public mistake, and argued that encouraging someone to live, train, and try again preserved their fighting spirit and determination. With that, she turned her attention back to the match. Naruto avoided Niji strikes. He closed his fan to use it to block Niji's assault on his chakra points. Almost nicked, Naruto opened the fan and sent a gust of wind that knocked Niji back. Naruto shut the fan and smirked as he pushed his bangs away, only for them to fall back into place. Before Niji could reply, the fan in Naruto's hand began to glow blue with a few catching glints. It was a hidden weapon, probably Senbon. Naruto opened his hand, and the fan no longer looked ordinary. Both sides were covered with neatly arranged needles like a fan made of Senbon. Naruto leaped into the air, soaring up to the level of the audience roof, hair and clothes fluttering as the sun shone down. He looked almost ethereal. Then, announcing his technique, Naruto swung the fan forward and sent wave after wave of Senbon toward Niji, until the arena was nearly filled with flying needles. Even Hayate jumped to safety. The crowd tensed as the Senbon whizzed toward Niji. At the last second, Niji shifted into a stance that widened Hayashi's eyes in shock. Niji activated a rotational gentle fist, producing a chakra dome as he spun. The dome deflected most of the attacks, but some Senbon struck his shoulder and leg. The scene played out like a fast, stylized combat sequence rather than anything graphic. When the dust settled and Niji stopped, Naruto was nowhere to be seen. He appeared calmly behind Niji with his fan held in a reverse grip, the typical stance of someone who had successfully snuck an attack from behind. Niji, who had expected to lose, admitted defeat without fuss. Hayate declared the winner as Sota. Naruto snorted and opened his fan, drawing the needles back into a storage seal until it was empty, then shut it and returned to the stairs. Yuki grinned broadly as Naruto walked to her and they high-fived. Hayate called for Kankuro of the Sand and Shino Aburame to come down. Kankuro raised his hand and admitted defeat to the proctor. Yuki taunted him as a wuss. Kankuro bristled at the perceived slight. He was not happy to have his fight dismissed as easy. Naruto scolded Yuki and pinched her cheek. Hayate then announced Shino Aburame as the winner. Naruto reprimanded Kankuro for showing no respect to his opponent and urged him to give at least a respectable fight, as clan heirs their actions represented their clan and village. Kankuro scowled and turned his head aside. Naruto then praised Shino's clan for their fascinating control over insects, and Shino accepted the compliment, saying that praise from Naruto was an honor because Naruto rarely praised anyone. Naruto liked Shino. He knew how to keep to himself and not cause trouble, unlike some of his more flippant teammates. Kiba sneezed nearby and wondered if someone had been talking about him. Hayate called the next round. Temari of the Sand and Shikamaru Nara. Shikamaru muttered that it was bothersome and that he wanted to give up. Temari took offense and demanded whether he had been paying attention to the rabbit boy's remark, asking if he thought she was too weak or that the match was beneath him. Menma elbowed Shikamaru and pointed out to the crowd where Yoshino, the Nara matriarch, stood shaking her fist and angrily urging her son not to be lazy. Shikamaru complained that women were troublesome as he made his slow descent down the stairs, much to Temari's irritation. Naruto, stroking Snowball's fur, admitted that the two people he least wanted to face in the exams were Yuki and Shikamaru. The rabbit had escaped Kaze and Hajime's watch after his match and had a special ability to track down his owner to seek comfort. Someone in the crowd murmured Shikamaru's name. Narumi laughed as if it were the funniest thing she had ever heard. Yuki responded with a sharp taunt, warning that Naras were famous for their intelligence and asking if Narumi did not know this. Naruto added that chakra and stamina were useless without a functional brain and that someone strong in body but weak in mind could be easily manipulated, exactly the danger of a ruthless Yamanaka heiress. He suggested that if the current heiress used her clan's abilities without mercy, she could leave everyone incapacitated before they could react. Ino overheard the exchange and, surprised, turned to her father to ask if it were true. Inoichi smiled grimly and nodded. Ino looked down at her hands, then at Yuki and Naruto, and felt a surge of determination. She resolved to be strong and to uphold her clan's honor, clenching her fist with newfound resolve. Hate announced the next match, Temari vs. Shikamaru. Temari took her stance and gripped her fan, her guard raised after hearing Naruto's remarks. She would not underestimate the Nara before her. Shikamaru, already alert, prepared himself with his usual reluctance, thinking he would much rather watch clouds than deal with this troublesome opponent. Hayate signaled the start, and Temari immediately tried to create distance, sweeping her fan to unleash a wind attack that caught Shikamaru off guard and sent him tumbling backward. Temari, still a genin by era standards, relied on a handful of wind techniques and trusted those skills to handle the lazy Nara. She followed with another fan strike that formed razor-like arcs of wind. Shikamaru dodged with a groan, but his shoulder took a glancing hit and he staggered. He managed to withdraw a roll of bandage from his pouch and quickly wrap his injured shoulder, mindful that he could not afford to waste strength. He thought through his options and began to formulate a plan. Naruto and Yuki watched with interest. Naruto observed that a determined Nara could be dangerous, and Yuki smiled widely. Shikamaru moved to the side and tossed a kunai and some shuriken toward Temari, which she blocked with her wind. He then used his shadow technique to advance, prompting Temari to leap back. She tried to blast him away, and Shikamaru was thrown and hit the ground with a thud. He stood, faced her, and set his plan in motion. Using shadows to manipulate the environment, Shikamaru guided his shadow to the weapons at Temari's feet, moving like a coiling snake. The shadow detour allowed him to outmaneuver her defenses and catch her off guard. Temari, focused on keeping him at bay, had underestimated how he could use the surroundings against her. When she realized she could not move freely, her eyes narrowed and she forced herself to look down at the arranged weapons. Shikamaru retracted his shadows and, with a guarded posture that now relaxed, claimed he had little chakra left and surrendered. The crowd understood the tactic, and the adults exchanged amused remarks about his familiar, lazy attitude. Hayate officially announced Temari as the winner. Temari felt no real satisfaction in the victory. She knew Shikamaru could have finished the match if he had wanted to, and she was frustrated that her opponent had held back. On their way back to the contestants' area, Temari confronted Shikamaru and demanded to know why he had not finished the fight. Shikamaru shrugged and said he was not as ruthless as she was. Being ruthless was too much trouble for him. Temari felt the urge to strike him with her fan out of irritation. Elsewhere, Yuki pouted when she learned her opponent had not shown up. She stomped like a child throwing a tantrum, resentful that everyone else got to compete while she sat out. She returned to Naruto's side and, in a teasing, sulky tone, told her brother she was depressed and wanted meat, joking that she might eat his small rabbit otherwise. Naruto almost forgot, for a moment, that this girl carried the demeanor of the goddess of winter and time. Really, appearance could be deceiving. Naruto nodded and handed the scroll to Yuki, who unsealed her food and began eating at a pace that could rival a member of the Large Appetite clan. The proctor called for Namikaze's Menma and Namikaze's Narumi to come down for the fourth match. The two siblings exchanged a look and jumped down into the arena. Yuki asked whom he thought would win as Naruto lifted her and seated her on a chair, then unsealed a table and set a huge plate of barbecue in front of her. Naruto replied that it would likely be a tie. Both had enormous chakra reserves. He observed that Narumi was flexible and swift but lacked reach, while Menma was physically stronger and quicker on his feet and could likely land hits first because of his longer limbs. Naruto chuckled at his own assessment. Yuki giggled. Naruto continued that the two of them possessed crafty minds and, being close siblings, naturally knew each other's techniques and would likely have similar jutsu in their arsenals. He noted that they mostly fought side by side rather than against each other and that they complemented and synchronized perfectly. He left the final thought unsaid, smiling mysteriously. Everyone agreed with Naruto's analysis. Kushina narrowed her eyes, impressed that he could infer so much from so few interactions. Danzo considered that the boy had talent, a brilliant mind, and a rare bloodline limit. He would be a perfect fit for Root, yet potentially dangerous if left unchecked. Menma and Narumi both thought that Naruto had completely read them. The proctor announced that Namikaze Menma would face Namikaze Narumi. The two shifted into their stances. A puff of smoke appeared in Narumi's hand and cleared to reveal a beautiful red tanto. She moved into her mother's raging red tide stance. Menma drew his throwing knives and adopted his father's hummingbird stance. Sparks of lightning danced between Menma's and Narumi's eyes as they prepared. They released their gravity seals with a flare of chakra that stirred the wind. On the proctor's signal, they moved. They disappeared from their spots and met in the center. Metal rang as their blades clashed and sparks flew. Narumi struck first against Menma's blade but was pushed back. Menma's strength gave him the advantage. The siblings exchanged a fast, elegant barrage of attacks and counters, darting and spinning across the arena in a spectacle of skillful, non-graphic combat. Kushina and Minato wore proud smiles. Naruto smirked, satisfied that his prediction had been correct. Privately he wondered, with a hint of ambitious excitement, what their faces would look like when they learned his true identity and his strength. Snowball shivered inwardly at how unexpectedly composed Naruto had become in that moment. After the match, Naruto narrowed his eyes, looked toward the crowd, and smiled. Yuki asked what was wrong. Naruto said that he would be leaving soon because his senior had arrived. Yuki blinked, swallowed her bite, and told him to say hello. Naruto left the room with an almost skipping step and approached a young man in his early 20s. The young man turned. His hair was the deep blue of the sea and his electric blue eyes softened when he saw Naruto. He wore a royal blue robe with a white inner garment and gold trimmings patterned with golden branches and jade leaves. He wore wide white pants and black boots. His sash was white and gold, and a black cloak with a hood rested on his shoulders without obscuring his face. Naruto greeted Aoi, and Aoi returned the greeting with quiet interest. Aoi asked where Yuki was, referring to her as his junior sister. Naruto indicated the competitor's box in the direction they had come from. Aoi was the lost true heir to the nearly extinct Yuki clan. He was not pure Yuki, his mother had been from the Uzumaki line, and those genes showed in his potent chakra, great stamina, and natural talent for sealing techniques, qualities that made him a promising heir. His uncle, Yuki Kiyoshi, had been very protective and doting, waiting for the day his nephew would take over the family's business and influence. Kiyoshi led the Pleasure Village, an old settlement that had existed since the era of the clan wars. A playful young master had once founded it, and its longevity had protected it from outside interference. Under Kiyoshi's control, the village's real business ran deep, an underground network encompassing a black market, an auction house, and an information trade. Kiyoshi had planted spies across the nations to gather intelligence and stored it for sale to interested buyers. The village's information network was vast and well organized, and those who needed proof of things could purchase it there at a price reflecting how valuable the information was. Aoi was learning to manage those operations and served as Naruto's senior. Yuki had accompanied them to strengthen her background and connections. Details about her origins were scarce, though it was known she had the ability to manipulate ice and snow. Naruto had not gained his foothold in the Pleasure Village and the auction house merely as a doctor selling medicines. He had powerful backers and significant connections. In that sense, Naruto and Yuki were important assets to the Pleasure Village, among their strongest fighters, and Naruto's medical skills were invaluable. Beneath Naruto's territory lay an underground medical hospital connected to the village's secret base. The Black Ice Cavern, whatever Kiyoshi had named it, served as their meeting place. Aoi explained that he had come to watch the match and to discuss a dilemma that had fallen upon Black Ice. He told Naruto that the Lightning Village wanted all information about him and had paid a fee. Aoi's uncle had debated whether to hand over everything, since refusing would violate their code. Naruto raised a brow and laughed at the idea that Lightning was wary of him. Aoi reminded him that he had once hidden his identity out of weakness, but that he had no reason to fear now. Naruto replied that nothing they could do mattered so long as the person he sheltered remained inside his territory. He argued that, as a civilian, he had the right to leave Konoha, and that Konoha would likely demand the Raijin no Ken. He invited Aoi to stay and watch a show later. Aoi smiled and patted Naruto's head, agreeing to watch. Across the arena, Narumi and Menma were attempting to overpower each other's Rasengan. Naruto dismissed the spectacle as a show orchestrated by clowns, amused at the theatricality. He observed that the two fighters were reluctant to go all out. If Narumi fought seriously, she would probably win, but that would tarnish Menma's reputation as heir. Narumi had the advantage with her chakra chains and could restrain him, while Menma would resist being boxed in and try to force a draw. Aoi listened and watched the match unfold. Menma managed to gain the upper hand, sending Narumi crashing into the wall. Narumi hit the ground and shakily tried to stand, but the council's expectant stares daunted her. She let herself fall back and lay still. Menma dropped to his knees and slumped, heavy with disappointment. The civilian council seethed at his behavior. Heiei declared the match a tie, but Menma felt bitter and resentful. This outcome was not what he had wanted, and he resented winning in such a way. Narumi, however, felt relief and gratitude toward Menma. His actions spared her from being judged weaker than her brother. Naruto watched with quiet amusement, thinking that coming to Konoha was entertaining. Dramas like this kept things lively. Later, Menma and Narumi rested in the infirmary. Naruto stood over them and produced 2 sealing tags. He explained that they were chakra-replenishing seals, similar to the pills but without the dangerous backlash, and offered them in exchange for a future favor. The two exchanged skeptical looks. Narumi wondered why they should accept if they could simply rest. Naruto scoffed at that notion, reminding them that Konoha might soon face invasion by both sand and sound villages. He mocked the idea of remaining idle at such a time. Reluctantly, Menma agreed to take the seals. Naruto applied the seals to their stomachs and they glowed, restoring energy to both fighters. As they prepared to stand, a loud explosion rocked the air and the ground. Naruto noted calmly that the attackers had made their move, picked up Snowball from the table, and headed outside. Naruto cautioned Aoi not to act rashly and reminded him that as neutrals they should avoid involving themselves in village matters. He turned to find Aoi gone. From the arena roof, Naruto and Aoi watched the battle like spectators. The surprise attack on Konoha had caused heavy losses for the invaders. Naruto observed a towering pillar of light, the 4-trigram barrier, and saw a massive snake and an equally massive toad engaged in combat. Aoi, impatient and driven by a more trivial motive, announced that his favorite restaurant was about to be destroyed and leaped into the fray to protect it, much to Naruto's exasperation. Naruto internally labeled him gluttonous but understood Aoi's strange priorities. A sand ninja lunged from behind, and Naruto reacted by dodging and kicking the attacker off the roof. He continued to watch the spectacle. The battlefield had quieted for a moment as many turned to observe an enormous clash. A one-tailed sand creature seemed set to face the 9-tailed fox, but Naruto realized the 9-tailed form was actually a combination transformation Gamabunta accompanied by Narumi and Menma channeling chakra to give the appearance of the 9-tailed fox. The sight drew a crowd of onlookers. A sinister aura of death cut through the air. Naruto sensed someone foolish enough to summon the Shinigami and covered Snowball with chakra to calm the bunny and dampen its heightened senses. He moved toward the source at high speed and reached a point just outside the barrier, peering in. Inside, reanimated forces clashed with Kushina and Minato while Hiruzen faced Orochimaru. Hiruzen seemed determined to take Orochimaru down with him, though Orochimaru managed to slip away. When the barrier fell, Naruto's medical instincts, his Soter side, compelled him to rush in immediately to help. Naruto skidded to a stop next to Minato and Kushina. He placed Snowball on Kushina's palm and instructed her to hold the bunny. Kushina obliged, cradling the small animal as Naruto knelt beside the dying third Hokage, Hiruzen Sarutobi. Naruto assessed Hiruzen and reported that the man was suffering severe chakra exhaustion and continued to decline. He produced several chakra-replenishing talismans and applied them across Hiruzen's body, 5 on the stomach and the new seal, 2 over the lungs, 2 near the heart, and 1 on the head. the ceiling tags glowed and began to channel chakra into Hiruzen, stabilizing him just enough. A Shinigami watched with cold detachment as Naruto worked. The Shinigami pointed out that the contract regarding Hiruzen's soul was not fully settled and that he was not obliged to take the entire soul. He could leave half to be collected later. Naruto responded with a sad, cold resolve and flared the Yuki chakra within his system. The Shinigami scoffed at the small human bearing the aura of the goddess of winter and time, then turned and departed. Hiruzen coughed weakly and lay unresponsive. Naruto placed his palm gently over Hiruzen's chest and drew runes of time around him. The runes wrapped the Hokage in a time seal large enough to hold him stable for transport. Naruto ordered the ANBU to take Hiruzen to the emergency room at once and to summon Dr. Uchiha and Dr. Hyuga immediately, conveying that Dr. Sotar requested urgent surgery. The ANBU hesitated only a moment before Minato nodded and they sprang into action. Naruto moved quickly to change, emerging seconds later in a navy blue dress shirt, black tie, dark slacks, a white lab coat, a blue stethoscope around his neck, his hair pulled into a messy bun and reading glasses perched on his nose. He added that he intended to use this as a bargaining chip once the truth came to light, then sanitized his hands and prepared for the operation. He walked into the emergency room with a confident, powerful presence that brightened the room's gloomy atmosphere. Naruto, Kaze, and Hajime worked for 10 hours straight. Kaze and Hajime rotated out when their chakra ran low, while Naruto paced himself to preserve his strength. Staff and onlookers sighed and stared in admiration at his endurance. When the operation finished, Naruto removed his surgical mask, gloves, and coat as a nurse wiped sweat from his brow. He announced that they had transferred the third Hokage to the ICU. Hajime and Kaze moved ahead to explain events, emphasizing that Naruto had carried most of the operation. Yuki entered before Minato could respond and reported that an emergency had occurred back at their clinic. A patient had been rushed in by Thorm and was in very bad shape. Naruto already knew the news. One of his shadow clones had relayed the information. He informed Minato that the payment could be delivered later and that he had another patient to attend to, then left with Yuki. They hurried back toward their village. Halfway there, Naruto dispatched a shadow clone to Suna and then used the special teleportation he had devised to continue. When he arrived, his clones had the situation under control. Naruto turned his attention to the person who had brought in the patient, Thorm Joun. Thorm had green hair and forest green eyes. He was taller than Naruto by 2 years, now 14, and Naruto could hardly believe how much he had grown. Since they had last met 2 years earlier, when Thorm had been thin and small. Thorm had once been a plant spirit. He had cared for a kunoichi who tended him and treated him as if he were a fragile child. Over time, Thorm learned much about his owner, her habits, her likes, and her deep resentment toward other humans. When a flower on Thorm was about to bloom, he eagerly awaited his owner's return to share it, but she did not come back. He waited for a week, and when the flower withered and no one returned, he began to wither as well. A neighbor packed up the owner's belongings, and Thorm learned that his owner had died. Devastated, he refused to accept it and slowly faded away. He opened his eyes to find himself in a cold, snow-covered landscape. He had no strength to stand. His body felt frozen. Footsteps approached, and through the blur he saw a pale-haired boy in a blue coat. The boy seemed surprised to find Thorm alive and examined him closely. The boy remarked that it was a miracle Thorm had survived in such thin clothing in winter. Thorm stared at the boy's eyes. The shade of the sky reminded Thorm of his owner, deeper and sharper, yet soft and gentle. Thorm noted how many contradictions the boy presented. He even wondered if the boy was truly alive. His skin was so white and translucent that his cheeks did not flush from the cold. The boy removed his cloak and draped it over Thorm. The boy, who later introduced himself as Soto, said his house was not far and that he hoped Thorm could hold on. Thorm blacked out. Thorm woke in a white room. Snow still fell outside, but the house felt surprisingly warm and comfortable. A voice told him he was awake and to drink something that would help him. Thorm turned and recognized the boy from before. The boy handed him a hot cup and warned him to be careful because it was hot. Sotar helped Thorm sit up. Thorm was surprised to find human hands where his branches had been. After a while, Thorm drank the hot herbal tea. Sotaro asked who he was and why he had been in the snow, suggesting the possibility that Thorm had been fleeing. Thorm explained that he had no name and that he had lived with a previous owner who was now dead. Sotaro understood and offered Thorm a place to stay. Thorm hesitated, remembering his former owner's warning that humans could not be trusted. Sotaro introduced himself by name, and Thorm tested the sound of it quietly. Sotaro apologized for his clumsy naming and, after a brief moment of embarrassment, declared that Thorm would be called Thorm Jown. Thorm repeated the name to himself with approval. Thorm now had a new owner. Sotaro was odd but kind. Thorm resolved to protect his new owner and vowed not to let him die as his previous owner had. Naruto sat calmly in his chair. Across from him sat Temari, Kankuro, Gaara, and Baki. Naruto told them he had called them at short notice despite their village still recovering from losses, including their Kage. Kankuro, still wearing his war paint and the same clothes, surveyed the room openly. Temari kept her battle fan ready, her seafoam green eyes guarded, doubtful, and irritated. Gaara stood between his siblings, his sand gourd secured on his back and wrapped in cloth. He wore red robes suitable for movement and the usual black shinobi sandals. He still appeared tense, his sand guards shifting silently in a restrained way that Naruto could sense. Baki remained guarded as well, his hand partly covering his face. Baki acknowledged that Naruto had informed them, but his unspoken impatience lingered in the air. He felt an unsettling intimidation from the child seated before them, an energy similar to Gaara's but more contained and potentially more dangerous. The thought crossed his mind that the younger generation seemed frighteningly formidable. Naruto stood and asked them to follow him. He told them they might thank him for what they were about to see and then led them to a long staircase. Gaara took the lead, followed by Kankuro and Temari, with Baki bringing up the rear. The walls of the corridor were made of glowing ice-like panels that provided light without any chill. After several minutes of descending, they came to a door. Naruto opened it and stepped inside. They entered a vast underground hospital, larger than Konoha's and built in a modern, unexpected style. The interior presented a simulated sky. Naruto later explained it was an illusion: stone pathways, bushes with flowers, lush grass, trees, benches, and even a large lake. Temari had plucked a flower and confirmed the illusion contained tangible elements. Baki was surprised to see many shadowy duplicates of Naruto working throughout the facility, at the reception desk, in the pharmacy, conversing in the halls, and even pushing wheelchairs. He realized the hospital was effectively run by Naruto and his clones. Naruto asked them to follow and guided the group to the VIP room. Inside, Naruto explained that Raza's condition was stable but that he had yet to awaken because Naruto had sealed his consciousness away. He said it was better for Raza to remain unconscious until he was stable and healed enough to return home. Naruto assured them that Raza was in good care. He added that Raza had survived a near-death encounter, fortunate because the forces of death had been otherwise occupied and his appointment had been delayed. Naruto had managed to pull the man back from the edge before death could claim him. He noted that the man on the bed was still alive, hooked to machines by a tangle of wires and tubes. Temari reacted with tears of joy when she realized their father was alive. Kankuro showed visible relief. Gaara remained expressionless. Naruto reminded them that, though Raza had been a poor father, it was better than truly becoming an orphan, and the village still needed him. The Land of Wind was not ready to change its Kage, there were no suitable candidates, and Gaara remained unstable and unqualified. Naruto said he had arranged a psychiatrist to help Gaara with his mental state and to repair his seal, because they could not have a Kazekage with an unstable mentality. A strange intensity flickered in Naruto's eyes as he spoke. Baki demanded to know what Naruto wanted in return. Naruto smiled and asked for sand a large quantity and proposed that Mr. Gaara could supply it for the good of the Land of Wind rather than for killing. Gaara showed a rare sign of emotion and agreed. Naruto then stated that they would sign a contract and that they would be able to retrieve the Kazekage's body with Gaara in half a year. Naruto smiled inwardly as he had expected. Rumors that Dr. Sotaro was in fact the long-lost youngest son of the fourth Hokage, the yellow flash, sent the shinobi nations into turmoil. Kumo pressed to bring him to their side. Konoha was even more determined. Iwa sought revenge for past grievances and saw an opportunity to use the sun against the shadow of the yellow flash. Naruto's house faced pressure from all sides, Konoha's agents at his front porch, Kumo pursuing from the rear, and Iwa watching his windows. Even so, Naruto had allies and escape routes Suna territory and subterranean tunnels linked to other villages, so he was not worried. He had no intention of running. He was prepared, and within his own territory his rules held sway. Naruto sat outside his house under the shade of a large cherry blossom tree and sipped tea while watching his visitors. They had learned long ago that entry with ill intent would accomplish nothing. The barrier would repel them. 3 delegations from enemy shinobi villages stood nearby, glaring at one another, hoping the others would back down. Naruto found the standoff quietly amusing. The barrier protected the area from attack in every way, from the air, the ground, the plants, even underground rivers. It sat like a great orb half buried in the earth, with seals around its core so that nothing could dismantle it without destroying the center. Verbal confrontations could take place within its limits, but any physical aggression would be met with immediate ejection and countermeasures. Pleasure Village maintained a similar barrier, its purpose to protect the village from being wiped out by other shinobi forces. Disputes were allowed only when related to internal matters such as gambling or ADLT. Bringing outside vendettas into the village was forbidden. That sanctuary had made the elemental nations uneasy. Missing nin who gathered in sheltered villages could not be reached by hunter nin or bounty hunters because the barriers had appeared about 4 years earlier. People gradually realized that the man known as Soter Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, the son of Minato Namikaze, was using his abilities with powerful effect, even to repel his own village's interference. The blow to other villages' pride was as much humiliation as it was loss. Inside the council chamber, chaos had ruled for 2 weeks. Minato sat with an unusually blank expression, watching the bickering with a chilling calm that reminded some of the cold precision of the yellow flash. A few members in Noichi, Shikaku, Fugaku, and Hayashi offered occasional remarks, while others remained silent. Minato's patience finally snapped. He rose to address the council, his chakra filling the room and silencing everyone. The sudden shift chilled the air and quieted all argument. Minato rebuked them sharply, calling them to act like professionals and adults. His tone carried an unspoken warning about the consequences of disobedience. He then declared that he was aware of the situation that had been the subject of their dispute for almost 2 weeks. The revelation that Dr. Soteru was actually Minato Namikaze's lost son, Namikaze Uzumaki Naruto, stunned everyone in the council chamber. Minato addressed the gathered leaders and villagers with a calm, cold authority, explaining that Naruto had been a child when he disappeared and had been considered a civilian within the Pleasure Village sanctuary for missing nin. He insisted that they had no right to force Naruto to return to Konoha, and they could not brand him a traitor for choices made as a child. Minato reminded them that Naruto held significant standing with the leader of the Pleasure Village and had support from elements within the elemental nations and missing nin. He warned that moving against Naruto could provoke serious political consequences, including interventions from Suna and attempts by Iwagakure and Kumogakure to sway Naruto to their side. Minato acknowledged Naruto's intelligence and caution and said he trusted that Naruto would not take unnecessary risks. Minato also argued that the Raijin no Ken should remain with Naruto. He explained that the sword was a family heirloom that revealed its true master and that the initial loss of the blade stemmed from lapses in their own security, not from any fault of Naruto. Peaceful times were no excuse for negligence, Minato said, and responsibility for improving protections lay with the village. A civilian named Haruno protested, insisting that it would be better for Naruto and the Pleasure Village to align with Konoha and urging Minato to call his son back as a father. The assembled shinobi reacted with incredulous looks to the civilian's emotional appeal. Minato addressed that plea directly. He admitted that he had neglected Naruto while prioritizing his duties as Kage and focusing on training other children to better control and contain the 9 tails. He accepted that he had been a father but had acted first as a leader. The village came before personal ties. He argued that, having neglected Naruto, he had no right to demand that Naruto return to a place Naruto no longer saw as home. The clan heads nodded in agreement, understanding the painful balance between parental responsibility and the obligations of leadership. After further discussion, guided firmly by Minato's pressure on those who wished to pursue reckless courses of action, the meeting adjourned. Later, Minato sat alone in his office, staring at a photograph on his desk. He compared the smiling blonde boy in the old picture to the man he had learned was his son now. He sighed and bitterly confessed to himself that he had failed as a father. He looked out the window and let the silence hang in the air. Across town, Naruto allowed himself a smirk when a clone he had sent to spy in the Hokage Tower returned with information. He could not deny the truth. Minato was a great shinobi, an efficient Kage, and a formidable soldier, but he had been a poor father. Naruto understood where that came from. Minato had been an orphan and a child soldier who grew up with no paternal example. He had been forced to choose the village over family long before he could learn another way. Naruto recognized that his own development had benefited from Yuki's care, which had allowed his potential to blossom earlier than might otherwise have happened. He harbored no lasting resentment toward Minato or Kushina for the neglect of his childhood. He could forgive them. He acknowledged that they were parents by blood but shinobi by necessity, and that reality had shaped their choices. Despite his rational acceptance, Naruto admitted to himself that he still yearned for approval. Praise from a man regarded as one of the greatest shinobi in the nations and from his father still delighted him and motivated him to achieve more. That instinct to seek a father's approval was deeply ingrained and difficult to shake, and even Yuki had remarked on it. Naruto covered those feelings with layers of walls and a prickly, proud exterior, but he could not completely fool himself. He reminded himself that, no matter what name he used, Dr. Sotaru or Namikaze Uzumaki, he remained Minato's son. That fact could not be changed. A short time later, Naruto's eyes sparkled as he read a new scroll. Yuki looked up from her food and asked what had captured his attention. Naruto explained that there would be an auction in Kusagakure in 2 weeks. Naruto showed the scroll to Yuki and explained that the auction would hold many treasures. Yuki snorted that it sounded like weeds being sold at high prices, and Naruto corrected her, insisting they were medical herbs, some even poisonous and only found in the summoning realms or in a neighboring country. They would be expensive because they were hard to obtain. He jumped to his feet with excitement and opened the window to call for Thorm. Thorm waved from below, blending into the green fields with a presence and chakra signature like a plant spirit. Naruto told him to come inside and then pointed to a passing shadow clone, instructing it to pack for a month. The clone nodded and gathered others to help. Thorm entered with dirt on his pants, hands, and face, reporting that he had finished harvesting the herbs and that they looked plump, green, and healthy. Naruto praised his green thumb and the way his care and flute playing had made the plants thrive, patting Thorm on the shoulder. Thorm shrugged it off as the least he could do after Naruto had taken him in and saved him. Naruto thought silently that Thorm still insisted on thanking him and did not seem to understand that being a doctor was simply his job. Naruto told them they would head to Kusagakure the next day because an auction was scheduled there in 2 weeks. He wanted to walk there in the hope of encountering Sasori. Thorm raised an eyebrow and warned that Naruto's obsession with Sasori of the Red Sand was worrying, since Sasori might try to turn him into a human puppet. Naruto insisted he was not attracted to that idea. He was fascinated by how Sasori could operate a puppet body with only one functioning organ, a heart. As a doctor, Naruto explained that he was driven by curiosity and a scientific impulse to understand how someone could survive without a heart and to study Sasori's deadly, often incurable poisons. He wanted to know their ingredients and how to counter them or create antidotes. Yuki and Thorm listened as Naruto continued, pacing and ranting. Thorm observed that Sasori often sounded insane when he muttered and laughed to himself. Yuki replied that it was not their problem and noted that Sasori was capable of handling things on his own now. They considered asking Naruto to stop, then agreed to wait a minute. Thorm left to take a shower. In the village, Minato informed Itachi that Uchiha Sasuke had gone rogue and ordered Itachi to retrieve him. Itachi bowed deeply and prepared his weapons, thinking angrily about his younger brother and adjusting the faintly visible glasses only he wore. Itachi raced from treetop to treetop at top speed. Sasuke was a day ahead. If Itachi maintained his pace, he could catch him before the border. The intense exertion began to strain his chakra coils. He recalled Sotaru's warning that using too much chakra at once would stress the coils and make it easier for the virus to spread, and that he should stop being a shinobi until fully cured. Itachi refused to stop and pushed on despite the agony, describing the sensation as if molten lava flowed inside him. After an hour, his vision began to blacken. Yuki hummed as she watched merchants pass by, waiting for the group that sold her favorite lamb and beef. Her impatience showed as she tapped a tree branch with her fingertips. Suddenly a heavy impact sent someone crashing into the tree, and Yuki tumbled out from beneath the fallen rock. She cried out in surprise and realized a human had been beneath the boulder. Kneeling, she examined the person's chakra and found it severely damaged and in a dangerous state. Recognizing him as Itachi, Yuki took a seal tag from her pocket and pressed it to his chest, sealing a rays spread across his body. Yuki froze his time, able to maintain the effect for up to a month while Naruto was away at the auction. Deciding he could wait there, she dragged Itachi's body into a nearby bush by his leg and sat on a boulder to wait for the merchants. Back in the village, someone reported to the Lord Hokage that they could not contact Uchiha Itachi. An ANBU reported that Minato's radio and tracker were unavailable. Minato frowned. There were no Jonin or Chunin available, and the remaining ANBU were patrolling the borders. Konoha remained tense and the surrounding villages were hostile. Minato ordered that Chunin Nara Shikamaru and Chunin Hyuga Niji be brought immediately, and the ANBU went to carry out the order. Gaara sighed in annoyance and wondered why he was doing this. He glanced back at the cloud of sand bearing a motionless body he recognized. Yuki laughed cheerfully that when her little brother was away she was in charge and liked to treat Gaara as a personal assistant, though she joked about calling him SLV. Gaara gave her a flat stare and rebuked her, asking if she had meant to call him SLV. Yuki waved off the detail, patted his shoulder, and skipped away. Thorm watched Naruto and the silver-haired medic amusing himself. Thorm voiced concern about whether Sotaru should be doing that, but Naruto dismissed the worry and said he was just admiring a fellow. Thorm held Snowball in his arms. The black bunny had been poked and examined because its fur was so black it looked like a void. Snowball whimpered for help and then shrugged that it could not do anything. Thorm looked conflicted about taking the bunny. Naruto observed that the bunny had extraordinary chakra, denser than Uzumaki chakra and darker than the tailed beast. The color was completely black. The chakra reserves were at genin level but already remarkable, and Naruto pondered this before raising his head. Distantly, the sound of battle reached them, blades, clashing and explosions. Naruto asked Thorm about the situation. Thorm closed his eyes, spread his chakra, and listened to the trees and earth. Being a former plant spirit, Thorm could communicate with nature and animals. He reported that Konoha was fighting the sound and that a boy with an Uchiha fan, heard to be Uchiha Sasuke, had gone rogue and teams were in pursuit. Sasuke was approaching the Valley of the End. Naruto frowned, said his seal felt wrong, and sprinted toward the valley. Thorm nearly lost his balance in a gust of wind but regained it and followed. Thorm thought how fast Naruto was as he chased him. Naruto felt tainted chakra from a curse mark merged with Sasuke and the chakra of the Nine Tails and Menma. He skidded to a stop at the outskirts of the Valley of the End. The fight had ended and Sasuke had won. Naruto narrowed his eyes at Sasuke's level 2 curse mark form and found it repulsive. Naruto opened his umbrella to shield himself and Thorm from the rain. They watched as the exhausted Sasuke crossed the border and collapsed. Naruto and Thorm leapt toward him. As they landed, rain poured and a rustle came from the bushes. Naruto cast a light mist technique to cover the area. Pakun jumped out of the bushes. Naruto picked up Sasuke's body and left with Thorm. Naruto did not worry about Menma, believing Kakashi would take him back. He placed a time seal on Sasuke before putting him in a scroll. He considered examining the curse mark but decided the medical and poison herbs were a higher priority. Konoha bustled again, especially the Uchiha clan. Losing 2 heirs at once was a bitter blow. Fugaku carried resentment toward Minato but did not voice it. He thought Itachi had died on the battlefield rather than in a hospital and felt some grim relief that his son had not suffered a slow decline. The idea that Itachi could have been defeated by something connected to Orochimaru frightened him. He sighed and tried to set the thought aside. Uchiha Mikoto grieved and was comforted by her friend Uzumaki Kushina. Kushina had been separated from her children while they trained under Jiraiya. Fugaku avoided going home to a household full of women and decided to spend the night at a bar instead. Shursui returned from his mission and, upon hearing the news, told the Hokage he would like leave for himself and for Uchiha Izumi for a few months. Everyone understood that he intended to search for Itachi's body or to bring back Sasuke. Minato granted permission as Shursui left. Shursui packed, went to Uchiha Izumi's house, woke the orphan girl, and told her to pack because they were looking for Itachi. Izumi hurried to prepare. They rushed to the gates, handed a permission slip to the startled Chunin guard, and dashed out of Konoha. Izumo, the permanent Chunin, and his partner Kotetsu were startled awake when a gust of wind delivered a paper to them, the permission slip. Shursui told Izumi he believed Itachi was alive somewhere, and even if he were dead, Izumi needed to see him herself. Izumi bit her lip to keep from breaking down. Uchiha Izumi had been Itachi's childhood sweetheart and distant cousin, and the news of his fate had shaken her deeply. Whether Kia or Ame, it shattered her heart. When Shursui, her second cousin, arrived with good news, Izumi felt her world lighten. Izumi asked where they were going, anticipation and anxiousness apparent. Shursui said they were going to Dragon's Den. Izumi reacted with shock, thinking of Dr. Soru Namike's Naruto and feeling a cold sweat. Everyone in the elemental nations knew what Dragon's Den was and who owned it. Built half a decade ago, it had risen to great prominence. Medics sought its herbs and medical equipment, but it was also fortified. Visitors could enter, but any improper actions that displeased the owner or caused disturbance triggered seals that ejected troublemakers. It was one of the safest places in the nations, though its owner could occasionally be unreasonable. Shursui said he trusted Dragon's Den to find Itachi, confident that they could handle anything. Izumi sighed and decided to place her hopes there. Naruto's eyelids twitched. He muttered that the seal was very troublesome, and Thorm looked taken aback. Thorm smiled as he collected scattered papers and began slipping out of the room. Naruto strained over the seal, working furiously to solve it. He declared triumph when he figured out the pattern and began writing down the seals, the markings crackling as he recorded them. The two bunnies, Snowball and the black rabbit who had not yet been named, looked up from their meal at their owner's intense expression, puzzled. When he finished, Naruto pumped his fist in the air, taunted Orochimaru in jest, and celebrated his success with his usual exuberance. He quickly tidied his notes and sealed them in his wrist for safekeeping, then headed off to bathe and freshen up. Yuki watched the two plump bunnies playing. Though the scene was cute, she couldn't help a fleeting, hungry thought and shook it off. A sharp knock interrupted her. Yuki cursed inwardly at the disturbance, jumped to her feet, formed an axe of ice, and marched to the door. She opened it and regarded the visitors with a blank stare. The visitors announced themselves as Shunshin no Shursui and Kuwa no Sakura Izumi. Yuki raised a brow, let the ice axe fade, and then opened the door wider to let them in. She told Thorm to fetch her brother and inform him of the visitors. Thorm paused, then flicked his wrist and reported that the younger brother had already gone to check on a patient before attending another. Yuki nodded and led them on. Izumi asked to speak first, but Yuki dismissed her and said her brother would take questions. They descended through corridors and stopped before a white door. Yuki opened it and stepped inside. Shursui and Izumi followed and froze in shock. Shursui wondered why Itachi was inside a glass cylinder. Indeed, Itachi lay unconscious in a cylindrical tank filled with a bluish, translucent healing solution. He wore white hakama pants, and tubes were attached to the tank to circulate restorative fluids. Colored currents of energy flowed to and from the vessel, and small, herb-like plants rested at the bottom, their presence soothing. He was unconscious. Naruto stood before the tank in a white lab gown over a blue turtleneck, glasses rimmed in blue, a clipboard and pen in hand. He checked Itachi's vitals and scribbled notes. Yuki crossed her arms and told Naruto that the visitors had arrived, teasing them with nicknames. Thu bristled at the teasing but kept silent. Naruto looked up, pushed his glasses, and offered a knowing smile. He noted that they had arrived early and motioned toward the tank, explaining that Itachi was under his care. He said that Itachi had fainted on the road after continuing to work as a full-time ninja despite warnings, and that choice had led to his current condition. Naruto reassured them that Itachi would remain in the tank until fully healed and emphasized that they should not worry about his safety but rather about covering the costs. Shui replied that money would not be a problem, and Naruto smirked. Naruto led them out into an adjacent room where Sasuke was contained within a ceiling barrier. Sasuke was held in a complex array, his arms and feet restrained, seals inscribed across his body. Swirling colors of chakra manifested around the area of his curse mark, clashing in visible energy patterns, and he struggled in obvious distress. Naruto explained that he was in the process of removing the curse seal. The procedure was nearly complete but had been difficult because a lingering spirit had been strongly attached. Naruto said the process would end and that their presence could be a hindrance. They followed Naruto as he moved on, their worry deepening. Izumi asked whether he was really Naruto-sama. Naruto stopped walking and tensed. Yuki also paused. Naruto turned his head back and asked what she would do if he were. Izumi kept silent, staring at the child in front of her. She said that it made sense. Naruto explained that he preferred to be called Sotaro, because the name Naruto felt foreign to him after so many years. He shrugged and continued walking. Shui suddenly threw 5 shuriken at Naruto from behind. Naruto reacted quickly, drawing a hidden kunai from his sleeve. The kunai multiplied into 5 as he flipped it, and the projectiles met in midair with a loud clang and a shower of sparks. The kunai pinned the shuriken against the wall through a hole. Shui paused, conflicted, then turned to Naruto, smiled, and walked over. Shui said he believed now and remarked that he had never taught that technique to anyone other than Itachi teleportation weapons. He ruffled Naruto's hair affectionately. Naruto was startled, then apologized for the instinctive reaction and waved it off. Shui grinned and called Naruto his adopted little brother. Naruto pulled his hand away with a chuckle and continued walking. Yuki cautioned Sotaro that he had a mission tonight and advised him not to overexert himself. Naruto nodded and acknowledged her. Izumi offered to help to repay their kindness, but Naruto declined, saying they would only slow him down. Izumi frowned at the refusal. Yuki urged him to take them along because the opponent would not be easy. Naruto hesitated, then set the departure time for 1900 hours. The two Uchiha exchanged a look and nodded. Golden yellow eyes glowed in the cover of darkness, the slit-like pupils fixed on a trembling subordinate below. Their lord was very angry. Orochimaru hissed whether they had found Sasuke. Kabuto stepped out of the shadows and reported that they had not, but they suspected he was in the Dragon's Den. Orochimaru smirked and headed toward the Dragon's Den with Kabuto. At the same time, Naruto, Shui, and Izumi made their way to Orochimaru's base. At the door to the base, Yuki opened and greeted them sardonically, referring to Orochimaru as the serpent and Kabuto as his little snake. A clone of Naruto sat inside, adjusting his glasses in mirror to Kabuto, and Kabuto explained that they had come to be healed and treated and that money was not an issue. Naruto, weary but composed, reflected that he was a medical ninja who would not interfere with the curse the Shinigami had bestowed. He suggested that Kabuto seek out practitioners of dark medical ninjutsu if he wished to pursue a cure. Kabuto showed interest, attentive as a top student ready to absorb instruction. Naruto observed Yakushi Kabuto as a brilliant shinobi walking a dark path, tempering his remark with a smirk. Naruto explained that where there is light there is darkness, and that while medical ninjutsu heals, dark medical ninjutsu often uses similar knowledge for destructive ends. He said many clans had practiced medical ninjutsu in ancient times but had declined, rumored as retribution. Only those willing to meddle in forbidden matters practiced the darkest techniques. Naruto then produced and unrolled a scroll, revealing a map. He pointed to the far right of the land of hot water and identified the Mu clan as residents and experts in dark medical ninjutsu, advising Kabuto not to offend them. Orochimaru studied Naruto carefully, noting the boy's potential and recognizing a familiar old journal Naruto produced from the drawer. Naruto said his reason for sharing the information was simple: returning a favor. Orochimaru chuckled, the idea of the boy as a possible vessel crossing his thoughts before he dismissed it. From the doorway, Naruto added that they should be prepared for the Mu clan to make things difficult and that presenting something irreplaceable could quiet them. He suggested a rare poison or venom-related item from the snake summoning realm might work, noting the clan's obsession with incurable things and referencing Sasori of the Red Sand as an example. Orochimaru paused, turned back, and grinned. He thought the child knew far too much. Later, Naruto infiltrated Orochimaru's hideout with Izumi and Shursui at his side. He instructed them to split up and search for their objectives, handing each a book or scroll. He told them to leave immediately in 2 hours when the scrolls disappeared, and they all nodded in agreement. Naruto created a shadow clone and the team dispersed in 4 directions. One of Naruto's clones found its way into the experimental laboratory. Shursui's face scrunched with disgust as he looked at the unconscious, restrained test subjects on the table. He checked his list before setting up his equipment, working as quickly and quietly as he could. Shursui found himself in Orochimaru's study and rummaged through files and tools with care to leave no trace of tampering, taking only what might be needed before moving on. Izumi worked in the chambers, tasked with locating and documenting every prisoner's records. She searched through room after room without luck until she came across a girl's quarters. She opened a drawer, found the data she needed, and allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. Naruto walked through the dungeons and surveyed the prisoners. Some were children, some teenagers, some adults, some were alive, some were dead, and some appeared stable while others clearly were not. He froze at one cell in particular. It was made of glass and rhymed with frost. The nameplate read Yuki Sora. Naruto's expression tightened with alarm. Finding a Yuki here would be both a relief and a cause for serious concern. He created a clone to continue the search and considered how to free the boy. The cell was a specialized containment unit linked to an alarm that would trigger if the prisoner was removed by force. Naruto closed his eyes and let himself disperse into a swirl of snowflakes, slipping through into the frosted cell without setting off the alarm. Inside, Yuki Sora, identified as Experimental 987, started at the unexpected visitor. The newcomer was younger, and Sora took in the boy's control over ice and snow with a mix of hope and disappointment. He wondered if the boy might be one of his clan, then noted the boy's hair color and suspected a possible mixed lineage. He could not sense the newcomer's presence clearly and questioned what sort of person he was. Naruto approached slowly and reassured Sora that he meant no harm. He explained that he had come to rescue him and asked if Sora would return to the Yuki clan. Sora hesitated and asked about his friends. Naruto promised they would be taken as well and urged him to hurry. When Sora took Naruto's surprisingly cold hand, Naruto helped him up and teleported them both out of the cell. Sora pointed to several other cells whose occupants needed help. Shadow clones of Naruto appeared and began working to free them. Naruto warned that they had little time left. Sora brightened when he saw his friends released. They regarded their rescuers warily. One of Naruto's clones returned with a man who had white hair and purple eyes and wore a dark robe. The clone tossed Naruto a scroll before vanishing. Naruto recognized the man as a Hozuki and found the addition notable. They moved quickly through the corridors. Naruto led the group to a door, set a seal, and opened it, motioning for everyone to enter. After everyone passed through, Naruto entered and closed the door. The seal burned away behind them. They emerged into a completely different place, leaving Suigetsu blinking in surprise and asking what on earth had happened. Naruto led them away, telling them that their senior brother would be pleased to know they were out of the cells. Sora asked who that senior brother was, and Naruto explained that he was the clan heir to the Yuki clan. Chapter 40. Ame blinked as Naruto walked in with several people following him. Naruto greeted Aoi and then grabbed Izumi and Shursui by the collars and pulled them out of the room, shutting the door firmly behind them. Aoi cleared his throat and asked who they were, trying to compose himself. Naruto dispelled his clone as a memory surfaced in his mind. He thought about how he might be branded a traitor in Konoha for assisting Orochimaru, but he reminded himself that he was a doctor and that Orochimaru was, unexpectedly, his patient. He concluded that he did not particularly care what others might think. Yuki entered Naruto's office and cast a silencing barrier around the room, warning Naruto not to let Orochimaru get his hands on him. Naruto scoffed that he would not allow himself to be experimented on. Yuki, smiling slightly, explained that as her host he was likely the one best able to withstand her cold chakra, and she intended to remain with him for a very long time rather than change hosts for reasons that would be inconvenient. Yuki explained that Naruto was now a demigod, that her blood ran in his veins and that he therefore shared half of her power. Naruto raised his head, startled by the revelation. He asked if that was why using jutsu tied to wind, ice, or mist did not significantly drain his chakra. Yuki smirked and confirmed that, as one of her kin, he was half immortal and that, given a few hundred years, he would become fully immortal and take his place as her brother. Naruto stared at his palms, where a yin and yang dragon symbol marked his skin. He murmured that he understood. Yuki urged him to cheer up, admitting that immortality would be painful but at least he would not be alone. Naruto thought that Yuki had been alone for so long and must now be seeking companionship. He realized he might be her first true host and that she wanted him to accompany her into another era. He smiled and nodded, then turned back to the papers in his hand. Yuki, overhearing his thoughts, rolled her eyes but was smiling as she turned away. That night, Naruto felt Sasuke's seal trigger. He hurried from his room in his blue polka-dot pajamas, still wearing his nightcap, grabbed his glasses, and rushed toward the ICU where Sasuke lay. Naruto burst into the room and slammed the door, alarmed by what he saw. The cursed seal on Sasuke had finally been removed. Sasuke himself was unconscious on the floor. Before Naruto could relax, a sudden force slammed him against the wall, leaving him dazed and breathless. It felt as if he had been slammed hard enough to reverberate through his whole body. Yuki asked what had happened, having jolted awake when she sensed Naruto's distress. Naruto opened his eyes and saw a transparent, spectral form of Orochimaru. The dark chakra pressure nearly overwhelmed him. He circulated his own chakra to resist before firing back, but in raw power the soul fragment of Orochimaru had the upper hand. The room's seals prevented the spirit from leaving, and Yuki's protection stopped it from entering Naruto. Sasuke still carried remnants of Yuki's chakra, so he remained safe for the moment. The soul fragment of Orochimaru taunted them with a malicious grin. A bluish-white light flared, and a shockwave sent the fragment flying back. From the light, Yuki appeared in a translucent form. She noted that fighting in this state was convenient. Physical contact was less effective. She observed that Itachi might have been useful in such a situation, but he was unavailable. Her eyes hardened with cold, precise intent. Yuki declared her fury at anyone who would harm her brother and launched herself at Orochimaru. Her nails elongated into claw-like extensions that glowed a faint silver, a clear warning of their sharpness. Although powerful, Yuki was not accustomed to fighting in this form. Naruto groaned as he crawled to Sasuke and dragged him to the side, thinking bitterly that he was not paid enough to deal with this trouble as he watched the fight. The two spirits exchanged blows in a flurry of motion that looked like a fast-paced anime duel, swift strikes, bursts of chakra, and sudden evasions. Naruto took in Orochimaru's form while his gaze swept the room. He crawled to the scattered documents he had been working on. Seeing them ruined made his head throb with frustration. He used his finger as a brush to write symbols on a blank sheet and focused his chakra into the paper. When the seal was complete, he shakily rose and faced the combatants. Yuki managed to kick Orochimaru aside just as Naruto threw the talisman. Golden light formed a barrier around the fragmented soul, and the seal caused the fragment to unravel and dissipate like mist in sunlight. Yuki stared in surprise as Naruto revealed that he had learned a few exorcism techniques from Priestess Cheyenne and former Priestess Miroku. Naruto said he never expected to use them so soon and shot Yuki a playful, disdainful look. Yuki complained that Naruto could have simply protected her documents, lamenting that she would have to start over after weeks of work were ruined. Naruto puffed up his cheeks in frustration at the loss. Yuki pointed out that he had saved her life, and Naruto bristled at the unfairness of her scolding. Yuki countered that it had all been Orochimaru's fault. Naruto's irritation was hard to handle in the moment, and he snapped that if she had a problem with his reaction, she should not provoke him. The confrontation ended with the spirit gone and the room settling into quiet. Naruto tended to Sasuke and checked that he was stable. After a short pause to collect themselves, the group shifted back to practical matters. Chapter End. Sora had become Aoi's right-hand man. He had an important task: to deliver newly acquired information to Dr. Satoru on behalf of his boss, Aoi. Sora used an underground tunnel to reach Naruto's territory more quickly, where he encountered a green-haired boy talking with a silver-haired girl. The silver-haired girl seemed to sense Sora's approach. She patted the green-haired boy on the shoulder and then vanished in a swirl of cold wind and snowflakes. Thorm took a breath and scolded the girl for scattering snow everywhere, then produced a shovel and began clearing the snow into a nearby bucket. Sora called out to get their attention. Thorm looked over and then Sora introduced himself, saying he was looking for Dr. Sotaru's office. Thorm nodded with a bright smile and told Sora that Dr. Satoru was indeed in his office. Thorm led the way and introduced himself as Thorm Joun, offering his hand. Sora nodded and shook it. Thorm urged haste, explaining that the files Sora was delivering to his younger brother were urgent. Sora acknowledged this and followed the green-haired youth. Meanwhile, Jiraiya had persuaded Minato and Kushina to let their children train with him for 3 years. Minato trusted his sensei's abilities but worried about Jiraiya's lecherous reputation and feared the children might pick up his bad habits. The thought made Minato shudder. Kushina waved and wiped her tears while telling their children not to forget to write. Minato comforted her and patted her shoulder. Kushina asked whether it might be possible to see Naruto, and Minato replied that if Naruto permitted it, perhaps. Kushina admitted she missed him and believed they all did. Despite avoiding the subject of their son's disappearance for years, she blamed their neglect for driving him away. Minato pulled her into his arms and acknowledged their fault, but he said he had never doubted Naruto. He remarked that Naruto's brilliance and determination would lead him to achieve great things without constant parental guidance, and that Naruto would understand the decisions made for the safety of the village and their family. Minato said he was proud of what Naruto had accomplished. Naruto read the files Sora had sent. The report warned that the Akatsuki were on the move and targeting the Jinchuriki. Naruto found the news alarming. The idea of the group collecting the tailed beasts felt dangerously ambitious. He sighed, wrote a message on a scroll, let the ink dry, and tied it to a messenger bird. He asked Thorm to send the bird to the Sand Village Council and the allied Sand siblings. Thorm agreed and carried the bird out of the room. A knock sounded at the door. Naruto called for the visitor to enter, and Sasuke stepped into the room. Naruto raised an eyebrow at the younger Uchiha's presence and asked what he wanted. Sasuke stated that he wanted to learn medical ninjutsu and requested to become Naruto's apprentice. Naruto reacted with surprise and repeated the question to be sure. Sasuke clarified that he wished to study as Naruto's disciple and become a medical ninja. Naruto asked why, and Sasuke explained that he wanted to help his brother and that medical ninjas were highly valued throughout the land. He acknowledged being marked as a missing ninja with little hope of returning to Konoha without the council's approval. Naruto understood Sasuke's motives and did not try to exploit them. After contemplating for a moment, Naruto agreed but warned that his training would be relentless and grueling, like going to hell and back, and that he would not allow rest until the techniques were second nature. Sasuke nodded his acceptance. Naruto set the training to begin the next morning at 5, and Sasuke felt a chill at the thought of the ordeal ahead. Jiraiya brought Menma and Narumi out to train them for the future fight against the rising enemy. Tsunade took Haruno Sakura as her apprentice. Naruto continued to train Sasuke while Sasuke also worked with Yuki to control his new ability. Alliances were forged, and a clan believed extinct began to rise again. Competition and a drive for power filled the tense atmosphere as everyone sensed the pressure of the coming conflict. As the young shinobi trained, a figure in a black cloak patterned with red clouds watched from ground half buried near a tree. Sinister golden and black eyes glinted from the shadow. Yuki looked at the sky and noted a change in the wind, sensing a brewing storm and a bleak future. She reflected that after many years she had found dealing with humans more interesting than staying in her den. Watching Naruto at his paperwork and then glancing toward the moon, her expression grew colder. Yuki declared that the coming fight would be one for the history books and determined that it was time to expose the secrets humans kept hidden. She walked to her room where a large hourglass sat on a table by the window and smiled darkly, saying the time was almost up and hinting that humans and everything in the elemental nations might cease to exist. Alone and ensuring no one would interrupt, Yuki opened a sealed compartment on a shelf. Inside rested a crystal ball with a small doll-like woman floating within, bound by black chains. The figure had long silver hair, 2 white horns, and a defiant, blood-red eye. Her skin was snowy white, a stark contrast to her cherry-red lips. Kagaya's pale, pupilless eyes stared right back at Yuki. Yuki sneered and asked if Kagaya could see what chakra had done to the world. Kagaya insisted that chakra was meant to be shared with everyone and accused Yuki of selfishness. Yuki admitted his selfishness but said it had been justified, and he suggested that those who used chakra only to seek power were better off removed. Kagaya struggled against her chains and protested, but Yuki said it would have been better if she had joined those who opposed him, that she could have had a different ending. Yuki reached out and touched the crystal orb. Frost and ice spread outward in a shimmering wave, freezing Kagaya in place. Yuki sealed the mechanism and locked it, and for a moment the moon flashed an eerie blue before returning to its usual glow. 3 years later, Naruto observed Sasuke from a distance. 3 years had passed since Naruto's identity became known and since Team 7 had split. Sasuke had been under Naruto's care and had become his apprentice. Naruto looked down at the photographs in his hand, sent by senior brother Aoi through Sora. The first photo was of Menma. Menma's bright hair rivaled the sun and his blue eyes shone with confidence. The familiar whisker marks still marked his face and his grin was easy. He still wore the conspicuous orange jumpsuit, but his stance was now soldierly and alert. Even with that bright outfit he had learned to move with stealth, his steps were light and precise, and Naruto noted that his chakra control had improved greatly. The middle picture showed his sister Narumi. She resembled their mother, with bright hair and a few red streaks swept into a high ponytail. Her purple eyes held mischief, calculation, and a spark of power. Her face was pale with whisker marks, and a victorious smile suggested a successful prank or training exercise. She favored black and red accents and carried scrolls at her hip, a sign that she was studying sealing techniques. Her posture was dignified and sharp, and Naruto suspected she would become the fastest female ninja among them. The last photo of the group showed Sakura, who had improved the most. No longer the spoiled fangirl, she carried an unmistakable, determined aura reminiscent of the village's strongest women. She had trained under Tsunade, with Kushina offering guidance, and she moved with power and confidence. Her pink hair was cut short and shaggy, her skin pale, and her green eyes shone with resolve as she prepared to strike a boulder, ready to shatter it with a single blow. Naruto set the photos down and turned his attention to Sasuke. Sasuke had changed as he grew older. His hair retained its familiar style, but his gaze was colder and more composed, filled with knowledge and quiet authority. He wore a lab coat over a white shirt and black slacks, with a stethoscope around his neck and black-rimmed glasses. Even while focused on his work, his posture was balanced for offense and defense. Naruto felt satisfied by what he saw. From where he stood, Naruto watched Sasuke working with meticulous precision on research for an antidote to cure his older brother. With Sasuke's lending of his special eye technique, their progress had accelerated dramatically. Naruto crossed his arms and leaned back. Sasuke glanced up, offered a wry smirk, shook his head once, and returned to his work. Naruto frowned at the smirk. He did not like being kept in the dark and felt unsettled at the thought of someone knowing something he did not. It was his responsibility to stay informed. And apparently Sasuke would not even crack under Naruto's pressure. Naruto shrugged, aware that apprentices were not meant to be kept forever. He realized he had been turning small, pointless things into bigger issues, which was unlike him. Sasuke called for Sotaru to come see something while focused on his work. Naruto mentally scolded Sasuke for not keeping his promise to call him sensei, though he kept the complaint to himself. He signaled a nearby shadow clone, which nodded and went to check what Sasuke was doing. Naruto stood and headed for the door because Yuki was calling for him. As Naruto walked through the corridor, he passed a window and caught his reflection. His silver hair-framed eyes as cold as a glacier. His demeanor was dignified and authoritative. He wore a lab gown over a blue dress shirt and gray slacks, white shinobi sandals, a blue stethoscope around his neck, and glasses. What frustrated him most was that he was still short. He now reached only to Sasuke's collarbones, and the baby fat in his face had not disappeared. Yuki's insistence that he keep his hair long only made him want to flip the whole hospital upside down. Naruto asked what they had. Yuki smirked and noted that Akatsuki was knocking on their doors. Yuki and Naruto watched as 2 Akatsuki members tried to breach the barrier. Kakuzu managed to get in for a moment before the barrier repelled him. Hayden was thrown back before he could step inside. Shortly after, Kakuzu was also hurled away. Naruto shrugged, calling it a waste of their time, and began to turn away. Hayden shouted aggressively as he struggled to stand. Naruto told them they could cross 5 meters and then they would talk, but if they could not, they should leave. Hayden responded with a string of curses. Naruto refused to sink to arguments with someone who wanted to provoke chaos and walked away. Kakuzu seethed silently, glaring at Naruto. Naruto mocked the Akatsuki members as prissy and expressed disbelief that these feared rogues were making such a show of themselves. The 2 Akatsuki members bristled and roared in anger. Yuki observed that Naruto clearly enjoyed provoking people. Naruto admitted that he found it amusing and that if they were displeased they could come and try to stop him. Yuki laughed softly. Naruto smirked, mischief shining in his sapphire blue eyes, and said there would be a show in the next few days. When Yuki asked whether it would be pleasant, Naruto said an intuition told him it would be interesting. He picked a china rose, and as he twirled it, a thin frost began to form around the petals. Yuki joked about his intuition, and Naruto pretended not to hear as he crushed the now frozen rose. A short time later, Naruto received a message from Aoi via his assistant Thorm. The message reported that Akatsuki had made their move and had targeted Gaara first. Although Gaara had put up a fight, he had been at a disadvantage with his entire village taken as hostages. Naruto murmured this information and stood. Naruto told Sasuke that they were going on a field trip. Sasuke raised an eyebrow and asked if Naruto intended to get involved in the matters of the elemental nations. Naruto teased that perhaps Sasuke lacked a sense of companionship toward Gaara, reminding him that they had both been under his wing for 3 years. Sasuke countered that Naruto would insist on going personally instead of sending Thorm because he knew Akasuna no Sasori might be there. Sasuke did not want to worry over a potential rival and preferred to avoid being involved if possible. Naruto admitted that this was part of the reason he would go. Sasuke asked if Naruto only intended to take any poisons Gaara possessed. If that were the case, Sasuke said he would not join. Naruto bluntly stated that he planned to take Gaara's body with him and make it his own. Sasuke, after a brief pause, declared that he was coming along as well and closed his book before standing. Naruto looked up in surprise at how quickly Sasuke had changed his mind. Sasuke said he had other reasons to be there and added that part of his purpose was to keep an eye on Naruto and make sure he did not go too far. Naruto playfully complained about Sasuke giving his sensei a cold shoulder, and Sasuke called him dense before leaving the office. Naruto watched Sasuke go and reflected on the uneasy alliance that would take them both to Gaara's side in the coming days. Sasuke smirked, called him dense, and shut the door. Naruto jumped up and ran after Sasuke, demanding an explanation. 3 blurs moved so fast and fluidly that they looked like shadows leaping from tree to tree. Their movements were agile and silent. The 3 were Sasuke, Naruto, and Thorm. Sasuke was annoyed with the extra light Naruto insisted on bringing. Naruto chastised Sasuke to stop spacing out and focus as they took a short break. They wore matching white cloaks, black masks that covered the forehead, eyes, and the bridge of the nose, and black robes and pants with black ninja sandals. Naruto asked Thorm to check their status, and Thorm nodded and slipped away. Thorm excelled at reconnaissance. His ability to communicate with animals and the natural world was invaluable. Under Naruto's training, Thorm had grown to dislike fighting and violence, preferring to help and heal rather than take part in battle. Naruto had tried to explain that sometimes strength was necessary to avoid being trampled by others. Thorm refused to fight whenever possible and preferred to save lives. Sasuke, with a hint of disdain, questioned why they were on this mission and whether Lord Aoi had not already sent some of their ninjas to Pleasure Village. Naruto warned him not to be dismissive and explained his reasons. He wanted to obtain some of Sasori's poison and experience firsthand the Akatsuki's abilities. The failed infiltration by the immortal duo Kazu and Haiden had not been helpful, and Naruto insisted it was better to see things for himself. Naruto reminded Sasuke to set aside personal disputes, saying he did not care about whatever disagreements Sasuke had with Gaara and that they needed to be professional. If Sasuke could not do that, Naruto told him he was free to return. Sasuke agreed and ordered Naruto not to touch their target once they arrived. Naruto, annoyed, reminded Sasuke that he was a doctor and that treatment required touch. Sasuke replied that he was a doctor as well, and Thorm cut in before the argument could continue. Thorm reported that they were almost there and that he could hear fighting nearby. He advised them to steer clear. The fighters sounded like hidden leaf ninjas, and he believed 2 of them were tailed beast hosts. If they got involved, the hidden leaf might drag them into a larger conflict, and the Akatsuki could mistake them for allies, which would spell trouble for Pleasure Village. Naruto agreed and let Thorm lead the way. Thorm suddenly warned of a change in plan. They had triggered something and there were 2 enemies ahead. Naruto signaled Sasuke, who immediately took position. Naruto leapt aside and landed near Sasuke, who guided him as Naruto examined the trigger. Naruto identified a well-hidden clone storage seal with an illusion placed on it. They were fortunate to activate only 2 clones. Naruto joked that Thorm was lucky to avoid the fighting entirely, and Thorm replied that he preferred to be a permanent medic and leave the fighting to the others. Thorm shouted a warning about 2 enemies straight ahead. Both were on high alert. Naruto shoved Sasuke off a branch just in time as the branch crumbled to ash. They tumbled down and landed back-to-back in a clearing, prepared to defend themselves. Naruto taunted their attackers, trying to provoke them into revealing themselves. Sasuke countered with a remark of his own. The attackers could no longer stay hidden. A man with gray-blue hair and green eyes in an Akatsuki cloak stepped from the shadows. Behind him stood Hoshigaki Kisame. Kisame grinned, showing sharp teeth. Naruto recognized the man as Tanaka Ryusuke, known as the Melting Hand. Tanaka's presence complicated the mission. Naruto murmured under his breath and stamped the ground, summoning a thick wall of ice that blocked a sudden barrage of corrosive energy. Naruto conceded that Sasuke had won the earlier bet of temperament. Sasuke asked who Tanaka Ryusuke was. Naruto explained that Tanaka had a dangerous ability. He could disrupt and melt chakra coils, the internal structures shinobi used to manipulate their energy. Naruto warned Sasuke to be careful. Thorm muttered that they must have had terrible luck to encounter those 2. Far away, Kakashi studied his teammates, Namikaze Narumi, Namikaze Menma, and Haruno Sakura on his squad, while Madogai led a team that included Hyuga Niji, Tenten, and Rock Lee. They had received a report about an attack on the Sand Village and the kidnapping of the Sand Village leader right outside his village. The attackers had worn Akatsuki attire, and Kankuro of the Sand had been injured. Sakura had been sent by Tsunade to tend to him before his condition worsened. When they arrived, they encountered a healer named Soto. Based on the chakra signature, Kakashi suspected it was a shadow clone handling the situation, but the clone had been efficient, leaving Sakura both speechless and a little dissatisfied. After gathering intelligence, Kankuro confirmed that the attacker who had left him injured was a puppeteer called Sasori, who, shockingly, turned out to be the lost grandson of Chiyo's grandmother. The revelation complicated their situation. Back with Sasuke, Naruto, and Thorm, Naruto studied their opponents carefully. He decided he was the best candidate to handle Tanaka Ryusuke, trusting his ice techniques and defensive seals. It was fortunate that Naruto's body had been prepared with defensive and offensive seals, like the barrier around his territory. That preparation would help. Melting Hand Guy could melt chakra. Naruto realized the man was practically invisible. If he were touched, Naruto believed he would be finished, not just his coils but his flesh. A shiver of fear mixed with excitement told him this was a worthy but dangerous opponent. Naruto told himself he was not on the same level yet. Reluctantly, he decided it would be better for Yuki to handle the threat. Ryusuke noticed Naruto drifting into thought and assumed he might call for reinforcements. He would not allow that, and he launched an attack. Naruto cursed, dodged to the side, and formed a thick ice wall to block the onslaught. Thorm, watching from the sidelines, felt a sudden chill and hurried to dodge. When he looked back to where he had been standing moments before, the ground was burned to ash. A small girl emerged, about the same age as Naruto, with charcoal-colored hair tied in a messy braid and purple eyes that glinted with a dangerous intensity. Thorm felt unnerved by the way that intensity had hardened into something predatory. He realized he had encountered someone unpredictable and violent. The girl wielded an abnormally large sword and moved with a feral hunger. She spoke in a sing-song voice about being starved, and Thorm noticed her making disturbing, animal-like noises as she gnawed at something she had taken. The whole sight made his skin crawl. Thorm felt both fear and disgust. He struggled to remain composed and silently called on nature to help him. The girl rushed at him. Thorm unleashed his technique, Dreams of Despair, channeling nature chakra into a wide, explosive illusion that expanded for half a mile and left him exhausted. Dreams of Despair was an illusion genjutsu that forced a victim to relive their worst nightmares repeatedly. It could dig deep into a mind and, if the victim could not escape, leave their spirit torn and consumed in what practitioners called soul void. Even thinking about that effect terrified Thorm, and the strain had pushed him to the point where he had no control over his body afterward. Naruto stepped into Thorm's field of vision, concern showing in his blue eyes as he checked on the green-haired youth. Thorm managed to say he was exhausted, and Sotaru sternly warned that the technique should not be used again. It could severely damage the mind. Thorm nodded and closed his eyes to rest. Sasuke watched Thorm fall asleep and asked whether the chakra Thorm had used might be nature chakra, and whether Thorm could be a sage. Naruto agreed that Thorm was special but hoped he would avoid using such dangerous power in the future. Naruto put Thorm safely into a pocket dimension within his wrist and turned his attention back to the girl. She seemed more animal than human, ragged and vacant, her behavior frenzied. Naruto did not hesitate to end her rampage. He used a non-lethal technique that neutralized her and erased the violent memories driving her, leaving her alive but unresponsive. Naruto believed this spared her from further torment and stopped the threat she posed. Having secured Thorm, Naruto started to walk away. Sasuke grabbed his wrist and pulled him into his arms. Naruto tensed and protested with an indignant yelp, threatening to retaliate, but Sasuke merely observed that Naruto was injured. Naruto insisted he did not feel hurt, only a slight numbness. Sasuke carried him in a princess-style hold for a moment, then set him down gently and knelt to examine his foot. He removed Naruto's boot and found a patch of red, burned skin on the ankle. Naruto still did not show signs of pain. Sasuke treated the wound himself while Naruto, about to take the bandage, let his verbal tick slip. Sasuke noticed the tick and only raised an eyebrow at the habit. When the dressing was secure, Sasuke wrapped his cloak around Naruto. He told Naruto to be quiet and accept the help. He scolded him as a JRK and insisted that if Naruto objected, he would carry him either on his back or again in the princess style. Naruto, surprised and a little embarrassed, fell silent and allowed Sasuke to help. Sasuke told Naruto that either way, he would end up being carried. Naruto protested loudly, but he still climbed onto Sasuke's back and held onto his shoulders. Sasuke supported Naruto's thighs and stood up. Naruto then said they should go, and Sasuke immediately left. Thorm sat in the pocket dimension, waiting and calling out to his little brother in his thoughts, wondering why he had not been taken out yet. When Naruto and Sasuke arrived, the fight was already over. Naruto instructed Sasuke to gather as many poison samples from Sasori as he could and knelt beside Gaara. Granny Chio checked Gaara to stop him from sacrificing himself. Sasuke felt unwilling and reluctant, but Naruto, exasperated, thought Sasuke was behaving like a child who needed coaxing. Naruto offered a reward if Sasuke brought satisfactory samples. Sasuke paused, considered for a moment, and then left with a smirk, reminding Naruto to remember the promise. Naruto set the matter aside and told Sakura to rest while he handled things. Sakura watched the interaction. Unlike Naruto, she understood matters of the heart better and observed Sasuke's distant demeanor toward women. She felt a little envious of Naruto's many advantages: appearance, background, abilities, and reputation, but she was also relieved that Sasuke had not been involved with the other women in Konoha. Naruto used Yuki's chakra to circulate through Gaara's system and revive him. Naruto welcomed Gaara back to the living, asking if he had any recollection of what had happened in the underworld. Gaara blinked in surprise. Naruto bent over and offered his hand to Gaara to help him up, but before Gaara could take it, Sasuke grabbed Naruto's hand and pulled him away, shooting a cold look toward Gaara. Naruto was about to scold Sasuke, but Sasuke produced the list of poisons he had collected from Sasori. Naruto's attention shifted immediately, and he scanned the list with excitement. On cue, Sasuke whisked them both away. They arrived on a high tree branch and stood side by side. Sasuke asked if the results satisfied Naruto. Naruto nodded and thanked him, then turned towards Sasuke and was unexpectedly pushed against the tree bark. Naruto took in a breath and looked up in shock. Sasuke's face was very close, and Naruto could notice the faint scent of mint on his breath. Sasuke placed his hands on the bark beside Naruto's head, cornering him, and leaned in, meeting Naruto's wide blue eyes with his intense onyx gaze. Sasuke said that he was collecting the reward. Naruto reacted with surprise at the implication. Instead of escalating the moment, Sasuke hesitated, then pulled back. The tension remained, but the situation ended with a charged, quiet pause as they both steadied themselves.